anyways, just to bring that up.
Yeah. Also, as the price goes up on silver, your premium you get from it decreases. So, like when you buy at these lower prices, you'll pay kind of a higher premium than you would at these higher prices because dealers don't want to buy as like basically don't want to pay high premiums at these higher spot prices as it's rising because there's always the risk of like it's going to fall. And I experienced this during I think when was it 2020 had a pretty good silver run from $13 to $30, and yeah, my I was paying $4 over per little Eagle coin back then at $16, which is a just effing massive premium. Another reason why Bitcoin destroys silver. Silver's shitcoin. And then as you approach like those $30 marks, he wasn't buying anything like $4 over or that 25% over. He was buying at like basically a little bit under at that point. It was pretty ridiculous. Like the spreads at these local coin shops and such are you just get it's I guess all I'll say is you're paying a lot to like have physical custody of these metals in terms of the spread on the buy and the sell. Knuts, you got any opinions on this? You probably can say some words of wisdom that are much better than what I could put out.
Yeah, I think in the long term, all the value of silver and gold is going into Bitcoin, which is basically the same thing but better in every single metric. So when in a world where Bitcoin exists, it makes no sense to buy dumb rocks. They are a thing of the past.
Agreed. But I will say that on one aspect of these dumb rocks is they actually can be transformed into physical objects such as jewelry. So you can't really make a Rolex gold watch out of Bitcoin yet. So I think the monetization value of gold is going to go away. The monetary premium will disappear. But I think there will still be an industrial value for gold long term. Like it will still have a
Yeah.
use within semiconductors specifically. That's a large chunk. Silver as well. That's pretty much already relegated to its industrial premium, and that is used in solar panels and very low resistance semiconductor wires and solar panels now.
Yeah, but that makes it a worse form of money. Any additional use case on top of the monetary use case makes it a worse type of money, less predictable, and yeah, I think
Yeah, I do agree
that's
with that. Oh, sorry.
yeah. Of course, you can make things out of other physical things. That's that's what humans do. They build things out of other things, but that doesn't necessarily make it a good form of money when there's a superior one around. So I think regardless of that, that is the ultimate faith of gold. I think like the value derived from constructing other things from it. Uh, because Bitcoin will function as a store of value much better than gold will over time.
Absolutely.
So I 100% agree with that statement. But where I wanted to go with your opinion on this, does gold die with the boomer generation? Do you think that will be kind of the last stand for gold as
No,
no? Okay.
I don't
No,
think so.
because
I think these things take more time than we expect them to do, and I think it will take. I mean, gold doesn't die. It arguably not even shitcoins. Other shitcoins die. I mean, there's always some moron somewhere holding on to them. So I don't think gold is dying or that anything else is dying. It's discovering its true price over time, and there is no end point to that. I mean, price is always a discovery thing, and the price tag on any object or anything is just historical data of what the last buyer was willing to pay for that good. Prices are nothing but that, so they signal to the market on how to best allocate your resources. And when we're in the early stages of hyper Bitcoinization, at least what the market is telling me is that I should put as much as I can into Bitcoin because it's it's the best place to put your money in at the moment, and it will be for quite some time, at least until everyone in the world is onboarded onto Bitcoin. But even after that, sats will disappear, and people will sell whatever they have to accumulate more Bitcoin. I think there's no end point to hyper Bitcoinization, but that it can go on forever, and we'll experience a very different world after a couple of generations. Oh, we won't experience it, but our grandchildren might. And that's what this is for. And the sooner people realize that, the faster the process will go.
Absolutely. That's I love that take, and I fully agree with that. I'm kind of curious though. I mean, have you dealt with family or people that are? I mean, I don't know what your age. It doesn't. This guy's. My friend is in his 60s and he knows nothing about computers or really technology or much of any of that. And I mean, what would your financial advice be for him to I'm obviously joking about financial advice, but because he's selling his house and is going to have a couple, more than $100,000, but he wants to basically, do this with silver and, probably buy gold bars and also rounds and all that stuff. And I think that he, I just mentioned out of the blue, I was like, well, why not just put like 10% or 15 or whatever into Bitcoin as well, or even like 5 or something, and he just thinks that it's because of what happened with Elon Musk and the way that he even brought up that it's used for drug money and that it's kind of all a scam, and he's had other friends that have lost money from it and all kinds of stuff. So
well, he should get off zero and compare what happens to his Bitcoins to what happens to everything else. And I think the age gap is a bit overrated. I've seen relatively recently, I've seen both Larry Lepard and Greg Foss orange pill people with their smartphones live, and people that were like 30 years younger than them. And they're not very technical, and they're both above 60. So I mean, you can always choose to be ignorant, but you can also choose not to be ignorant. And this goes for boomers too. I mean, just study stuff. You're not dead yet. I mean,
yeah,
as long as you have a brain, you can understand stuff.
So
yeah, you have to have a desire.
But brain plasticity does decrease over time. That hence a lot
It
of people
does.
start. Yeah. So I actually have.
But I would still advise these people to allocate some of what they own into Bitcoin, and then if they survive for any significant amount of time, they will see the price of their Bitcoin and the prices of their other assets, and they can compare them, and then they can make another judgment call later on.
So, Knut, I got one last one for you, real quick. So, do you know about Gresham's law?
Yeah. Do you know about Thayer's law?
No, actually, I don't.
Thayer's law is the opposite of Gresham's law, and it kicks in when Gresham's law is not applicable anymore. So Gresham's law says that if there's a good type of money and a bad type of money, people will prefer to get rid of the bad type of money first.
Yep.
But then again, on the other side of that equation is the people accepting payments, and they will tend to not accept payments in the bad type of money over time. But they will transform their businesses and start accepting nothing but the good type of money over time. So if you play out Gresham's law over time, you get to a stage of Thayer's law where nothing is accepted but the better type of money, like in Venezuela or Cuba or places like that, where merchants prefer dollars, even though they're not legal tender and it's forbidden to use them. So there's that. And that is, I think, what will happen to Bitcoin over time. Hyper Bitcoinization is a personal thing, and it starts when you start accepting nothing but Bitcoin for your goods and services. Now, not even I am there yet. I'm still selling stuff for euros and dollars that I can later on convert to Bitcoin, because like I can sell more stuff that way at this point in time. But the point is that over a long enough time period, that will disappear, and people will start accepting Bitcoin more and more until they realize that accepting anything else is a loss for them. So yeah, give it time.
So thank you so much for that answer, because you led into right what I was going to ask, which is I didn't have a name for Thier's law. I was wondering like what happens when Bitcoin becomes the only unit of account, because nobody will accept any other form of money. But I also had this image during the period of which Gresham's law is still in effect, that people would attempt to spend their gold and silver before they're willing to give up their Bitcoins.
What I'm struggling with is the unit of account part. I have no doubts about Bitcoin being the best store of value and the best medium of exchange available to the entire globe. But the unit of account thing, that's a whole different discussion. And I think that, I mean, people imagine a scenario where there's an S-shaped adoption curve and the price of Bitcoin flattens out. And in my view, the S-shaped adoption curve is for the number of users, but not necessarily for the price, because the price can still go up and the purchasing power can and will go up post hyper Bitcoinization. So you get into a world where it will be very hard to price things in Bitcoin. I mean, that is the case right now, and I think this doesn't end, because you can't have a stable supply of money and stable prices at the same time. The thing central bankers do is they try to make prices stable in order to lure the population into thinking that that's the natural state of things, when it's really money. Money shouldn't be the stable thing, or money should be the stable thing, and prices shouldn't be stable. They should go down over time with some volatility. And when we get further into hyper Bitcoinization, I think it will be harder and harder to use the dollar for pricing things, as the dollar loses more and more value. And we might need to even find some other option, like pricing in kilowatt hours or something, because Bitcoin, it will be hard to price things in Bitcoin.
So my thought with that was kind of like how we negotiate a raise every year, which historically has been a couple percent, but obviously we're going to have to negotiate for more given the way inflation's going. My thought was, in a hyper Bitcoinized world where Bitcoin is the unit of account, we would likely be taking a pay cut every year in Bitcoin for, say, 5%.
Yes, this is a very interesting thing, because people are unable, I think everyone on Earth is unable to see what a post-hyper Bitcoinized world looks like, because it's so vastly different from what we live in now. Pure mathematics says that, like, if with a finite supply, most Bitcoin stacks will have to go down over time. So a profitable business could be a business with red numbers, where their buying power goes up, but their total amount of Bitcoins goes down over time, just at a slower pace than it would for a normal person having to buy groceries and stuff. So the costs of living, you will have to pay for your cost of living regardless. But the important takeaway is that your buying power can still go up when your total amounts of Bitcoins is going down. So it might even make sense in the future to start a business to just lower the rate of loss denominated in Bitcoins per time unit. So this is so weird, but I think what this means is much deeper than we can grasp. And I think what it does, it incentivizes everyone to save rather than spend, and it also incentivizes everyone to adopt a lower time preference. And these two things taken together, and everyone benefiting from the success of Bitcoin, makes us more friendly to one another and ultimately trusting one another more. So I think we'll get to a state where fewer transactions are needed, and we'll actually start exchanging goods and services without needing to use money at all, which is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it that way, because it will benefit both parties to not diminish their Bitcoin stacks, but just to exchange one service for the other. And the irony in this is that we'll get to, with trust in the base layer of society, in the monetary layer, because of how Bitcoin works, so that no one trusts anyone in Bitcoin, but we have verification. That enables us to trust one another more, not less, but more. So over time, we'll get closer to this utopian vision in the, if you remember the Zeitgeist movies and the Venus Project, where there's this futuristic city where everyone just helps one another all the time. Bitcoin is the bridge to that can enable that future, where humanity finally, John Lennon's Imagine becomes a reality, and we start being good to each other, and we don't crave material excess anymore, because we get closer to a mindset that is more to that which you can do without you own, and we start realizing what we can do without, and we live happier, more philosophically content lives afterwards. So that's where I think this is taking us, and it's very beautiful. And the more I think about it, the more profound it is, and the more profound it becomes. So I think that this is the contents of my latest article in Bitcoin Magazine called the Real Scaling Solution, and it's the realization that the necessity for transactions will go down and not up. So we're trying to solve scaling from the wrong angle. Bitcoin just being there and being Bitcoin is more than enough to make us more altruistic and more loving to our neighbor. Yeah, this is a short version.
Thank you. Like, I gotta ask, because you explained some of these like very abstract ideas and concepts so well, and like verbally and like choice of linguistics. What are your backgrounds? Did you just like grow up and just had like this natural knack for this kind of stuff? Like, I think you write, correct? Or did you go through school and like philosophy or?
Oh, thanks a lot. No, I grew up. Well, I'm from Sweden, but I spent some portion of my childhood abroad. I was in Africa a couple of times and lived in Mozambique and Tanzania, which is where I learned English at an early age. And after that, I've been, writing songs all my life. I guess I come from a sort of an academic family, but I've never been an author before I started writing about Bitcoin. But I just curious and keen on learning things. So I try to become better at writing and at thinking and at expressing myself. And I do that by doing it a lot. Right now, this is an exercise for me in arguing for my points. Everything is. So, yeah. And thank you for your kind words, by the way. I think I'm on my way to becoming a better debater and thinker and author, for lack of better words. But I'm far from what I could become, I hope. I still find flaws in my old writings all the time.
It's that way for everybody when you like start honing a skill. Like, so I was going to mention the reason why I asked specifically is like I focus on like computer programming and such, and like hardware, kind of Bitcoin is the network and the code. But I don't do well extrapolating those ideas out to like how it affects society. So I'm sorry I can't argue your points on this. I wish I could, but I don't. But yeah, I was very interested to hear that, and the way you put it was just so easy to kind of digest. So that's all.
Yeah, another thing in my background is I used to be a tall ship sailor, so I crossed the Atlantic and other vast amounts of ocean a couple of times, and I had a lot of time to think there, and we visited a lot of countries. I've been to over 45 countries, and I've seen what they look like, and I always try to make sense of why they are the way they are. And it wasn't until I discovered praxeology, really, that the world started to make sense. And then I felt this urge to express myself.
So I heard you use that term in the last space. I apologize. I don't know what praxeology is. Do you have them explain it like I'm 5?
Yeah, praxeology is to the subjective what mathematics is to the objective reality. And it's a term coined by, or at least popularized by, Ludwig von Mises, the father of the Austrian School of Economics. And it's the study of human action from a set of axioms that are taken for granted because they're arguing against them would verify them. So the first axiom is man must act, which every person has to act or do something in order to survive. If you just don't do anything, you will die from starvation. And the other axiom is we always discount the future. So we prefer to get paid now rather than later, which is why negative interest rates aren't really true. They aren't really negative. There's someone taking your money somewhere. There's no such thing as a negative interest rate. And another axiom is that your body is your property, and you can try to argue against that, but in order to do that, you have to take control over your vocal cords and your tongue and your lips, proving that you actually do own your own body. And every other type of property is just an extension of what you do with your body. And from these simple truths, you can use deductive reasoning to prove other things, and never breaking the logic of the thoughts. So you can prove that voluntary interactions are better than provide a bigger net outcome for both parties than forced ones. So it's an argument against violence and for free markets or voluntary interactions. So if you don't know praxeology, there's a good place to start is a very unknown YouTube channel called Prax Girl, which is an American lady explaining praxeology for dummies, really in the short 5-minute episodes where she explains the terminology and so on. And after that, I mean, I just devoured all the literature. I'm reading Hayek at the moment, and I've read Human Action twice, and I'm reading all of Rothbard's books and writings as I go along, and I try to just let it sink in because there are so many insights there. So it's just completely mind-blowing. So to me, discovering Bitcoin and seeing it for what it is at an early stage was a bit like in the late 90s when the internet was about to happen, and I could foresee that this was going to change the world, but I chose not to act upon it, but become a sea captain instead of a computer geek because of whatever my parents told me and the school system told me. So I see this as a second chance in life to actually act upon an insight that I think I have that other people have not. The penny hasn't dropped yet for other people, so I try to make it drop by provoking thought in whoever I'm speaking to, or whoever my readers may be. So that's why I do what I do, and I love this journey.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead, Portland. Or
I'm sorry. I want to go.
anybody
Now,
else?
if you want to go, you can. You had your hand up first.
Yeah, some Mallards or Mallard.
No,
Mike?
go ahead, Portland. I was going to ask kind of a soft fork of a question. You go ahead because it's you're probably going to ask something more linear.
Mine is directly Knut's again. You mentioned you were a sea captain. You kind of said like afterwards it was a second chance. Do you like? I spent a lot of my time in my 20s. I'm now 30, but I kind of like worked for my dad at the motorcycle shop, but it wasn't my real calling or anything. And then I kind of just stepped out and did what I wanted to do, and everything seemed to start like lining up really quickly. Was that kind of what you imply by this situation? You kind of just stopped doing that, and you kind of took the reins to your life, and kind of everything started working out a lot better? Or I guess,
Yeah.
is that right?
Sort of. Like when I had a family, I had to start working on smaller ships with shorter turns, where I instead of being out for 2 months and home for 2 months, I started being out for 2 weeks and home for 2 weeks. And then I started working in an office, and I ended up as an HR manager for a shipping company. But I quit that last year and chose to focus solely on my Bitcoin stuff, and it's the best choice I ever made. So the network of people I know at this point, it's just on a completely different level than the people I knew a year back. So I'm getting a lot of more intellectual value out of life for sure. But the thing is, I think life is a series of choices, and you make those choices, and you try to learn from the consequences of those choices. So it's not like first I was a sea captain and then I was a Bitcoiner. It's more like the process of discovering what you are and what you're supposed to do is more about finding what you don't want to do than actually finding what you want to do. You try different stuff and you stop doing what you're not enjoying doing, and you will find truth sooner or later.
Thank you. That was perfect.
Knut, I actually, again, awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight. And really to anybody else in the room. So my job, again, is to be sort of a Debbie Downer in a lot of situations, and think about, the 1% of psychopaths that exist in our population that we can't, get away from genetically. And, it seems when you move to a hard money system like Bitcoin that has the ability to evaporate if you destroy your private keys, there is an inherent game theoretic aspect baked into that, where if I'm, a neighbor that is interested in accruing more value to what I hold, and I can do that by destroying my neighbor's seeds, is this something that we should be at all concerned about moving forward in the future? And then obviously guarding against that.
I had this question yesterday too, and it's a misunderstanding of the game theoretical scenario that's playing out right now, and that is the amount of value that you could potentially increase your stack with by destroying someone else's stack. It's just not a viable option, because you remove that party from the entire economy. And
Sure.
so the value of that person, which is way higher than you think, by the way, goes down. So your total buying power and your total wealth is not going up, even if it might go up in the dollar terms of the value of your Bitcoin, but you're increasing everyone else in the system stack as well. And if you remove one holder, the people that benefit most from that are the people that hold fewer less bitcoins and not bigger stacks. I mean,
Right.
so the game theory doesn't work out. It's always better to voluntarily interact with a Bitcoiner than to violently interact with them. And this goes very, very deep. And let's say you own a house, but 99% of your wealth is in Bitcoin. Then a psychopath might put a gun to your head and say that, give me your house. And he might take the house, but you still have your 99% wealth in Bitcoin. And that might be stored in that head. And there's no way for that person to know how many Bitcoins you actually own. You cannot know that about any other person. You don't know how many Bitcoins another person owns. You can only assume. So it makes way more sense for any actor, malicious or not, to try to trade with the other person and interact voluntarily with them. It's more profitable for you to provide something of value back than to go through the process of, you know, acquiring weapons and trying to force the other person to pay. And bear in mind that we've been in that situation for a very long time where violence was very profitable. All of human history has been like that. And since the First World War, the populations of the earth have been in a perpetual war against the state, and a losing battle, because the state has been able to print money. They've been allowed to do that. And as long as we keep using their money, we keep funding all their malinvestments and misallocation of resources, such as armies and war efforts. And if we take away the we take away the profit motive from that, we also take away the the incentives to act violently and forcefully. So this and this goes very deep, and it's true on very many layers of society, especially since only individuals can own Bitcoin. So a nation state can't really own Bitcoin. They can only own custodied Bitcoin, where someone else holds the keys. And that person in himself always has an incentive to escape that and just take the Bitcoins and run. Not your keys, not your coins. So I think we're headed towards a world where psychopaths are much less likely to be able to pull off whatever their schemes might be. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, and I truly hope you're right. Thank you.
Okay, devil's advocate for the debate part of this. Throughout human history, gold has incited violence throughout history. People would kill others for gold. When a nation gets plundered, the gold is always taken. How would Bitcoin be different, as Bitcoin is held in a similar manner other than one aspect, which is the individual can choose to die with the private key? And
gold,
multi-sig.
Yeah, gold is confiscatable. Bitcoins are not at all as confiscatable as gold. If you die with your Bitcoins die with you. You die with a gold bar, it can be dug up again. So the gold doesn't disappear, the Bitcoin does. And you have also the option to store your private key in different nation states. You can do multi-sig, you can do all sorts of things to protect your Bitcoins that without having to employ security guards or even an army. You can do all of this, and but the big takeaway that I think is often overlooked is that no one can know how many Bitcoins you own. So even if they think that they've stolen all your Bitcoins, that might not be true. And if they kill you and remove you from the equation, well, then they have one less actor to interact with and one less player on the market. And that's not good for them. There's no incentive to do that if you really think things through. And let's just hope that our military strategists and so on do think things through. I mean, the goal of a psychopath is that is only interested in wealth, is acquiring more wealth and more power, and it's easier for them to do that by being nice to Bitcoiners than being violent to them. Bitcoiners will go where they're well treated. So yeah, I think the how much Bitcoin removes violence from the equation is vastly underrated, especially if you think long term. It's a perfect shield against violence because you put owning into the realm of knowledge, so knowing becomes owning. So the battle is for knowledge and not physical property, which puts it in the intellectual realm, and then the best chess player wins, and not the best risk player. Yeah, a bad analogy, but you get my point, I think.
Yep.
I
Thank you.
still think Portland, you have some validity here. Also, I think you're saying. Sorry, I just want to add to this that you say it mitigates violence by putting it in like a realm of knowledge or intelligence. I think people can still use counterintelligence or things about you or like you can still be pressured and negotiated into giving up parts of your Bitcoin stash, if not as much as you have access to at a time being. I mean, even nowadays, with gold and with Bitcoin and both of them, personally, I've dealt with the gold as a hard money asset and personal security, and been stalked even this past week, even just being out with gold around my neck. And secondly, with Bitcoin, I have friends who are in the private seed phrase and like security strategy for private clients space who have been tricked by very high profile people and coerced and violently stolen Bitcoin from, being known to have had millions of dollars worth of coins. And regardless if it's their full stack or not, there was still a lot of, high intensity violence and risk involved in that. And I think there's only so much you can do security wise. And like, I don't think putting it in a knowledge or information sector separates it from violence as much as you seem to play out.
Well, short answer to that, it doesn't take away risk completely. Definitely not. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in every single way, it's better than anything that preceded it at doing this. So we're getting into a more peaceful world rather than a more violent world. And that's key here. Because if you play that scenario out over centuries, you see that, wealth will be distributed because of how things play out and what Bitcoins get stolen or not. But sooner or later, you end up in a scenario where everyone is careful enough to custody their Bitcoins in a way that they can't be stolen. If you play it out, the thought vector out long enough, on a long enough time frame. Of course, right now, people are getting tricked all the time, and they buy into bullshit narratives, and they shapeshift their Bitcoins into some shitcoin, and all sorts of other stupid things that you might do, and you might, split your seed phrase into 3 parts, and you might give it to your mother or some other stupid way of securing your Bitcoin. But over time, the winners will be those that managed to store their Bitcoins properly, regardless of who they are or where they are. So we're short term, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of ways to scheme people out of their Bitcoin, but long term, the Bitcoins will end up where they were supposed to end up, or they will end up wherever they end up. And there's very little a violent actor can do about that. So I think this takes centuries rather than decades. So we won't see, what we'll experience is the beginning of it. And I just think it's vastly more powerful than the mainstream view of it is, even within Bitcoin circles. I think people are way too bearish or way too bearish on the idea and the philosophical impacts of it.
Yeah, and I want to say also that in a hyper Bitcoinized world, everyone's a Bitcoiner. So it's not like now, because you're talking about some high profile Bitcoiner getting targeted or something. Well, if everyone's a Bitcoiner, who exactly are you targeting? And to Knut's point, you don't know in a hyper Bitcoinized world how much Bitcoin somebody has. And we also talked about the low time preference, whereby folks are just not incentivized to buy material items they don't need. It changes the fabric of society, I believe. And the other thing I'll say is I've known billionaires to have traveled freely amongst the plebs. And I'm not talking about Bitcoin billionaires, I'm talking about fiat billionaires and very high net worth millionaires who move about freely and don't travel with security and have been fine. They've been free to move about in the world. And that's someone who we actually know is an extremely high net worth individual. But I don't think that we're going to be seeing as materialistic of a society in the future. And I think Bitcoin actually incentivizes us to not flash our wealth. Like, we're incentivized to downplay how much we have and just actually be way more personable and genuine and honest, because when you meet someone, you really don't know if they could be a billionaire or they could be someone with a negative net worth, and you would have no way of knowing, especially if they're a Bitcoiner, and they might be incentivized to, not have a newer car and not have anything flash. I think was it Pierre Rochard or who was it that said, if your car is younger than Bitcoin, then you're short Bitcoin. I forget who said that, but Bitcoiners are selling their chairs. And, I looked at my car and turns out it was born the same day as Bitcoin, and it's old as shit, and it's, covered in scratches, and I'm just going to leave it, because why would I want to get rid of something and have less Bitcoin?
Yeah, may I add a couple of things to that, just real short? This past year, I've been doing Bitcoin stuff full time, but I've hardly touched my stack. So I could have had 0 Bitcoin. Maybe I do. You don't know how many Bitcoins I have. And you definitely don't know anything about where they are. And the same is true for everyone in this room and for everyone else on Earth. You cannot know. But I've been talking about Bitcoin, and I've been, writing books about Bitcoin and exchanging goods and services. That is my book for other stuff, without ever touching the Bitcoin network. But I'm, in my view, that is still using Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not only the protocol and the value, the tokens and the network around it. It's the idea, and you can use the idea, and you can. And this is why I think this utopia is closer than we think, because we already have the capacity to cooperate with absolutely everyone we meet within us. So the private key to a Bitcoin is really a private key to your heart, so you can wear it on your sleeve in public. That's what it is. It unlocks something within us that makes us more capable of loving one another, because when we know that we've secured our future and the future of our children by holding an asset that will never go away, we're free. And we can do whatever we want. And most people want to do good stuff. So using Bitcoin, that is such a broad term. And people think this is about the network. The network and money in general, it's just an abstract concept. And when we run this particular abstract mathematical experiment in the back of our heads, we unlock something within our psyches that makes us able to do all these nice things to each other and exchange value for value. So we're getting to a better world, regardless of what anyone thinks about it, by just thinking about Bitcoin. Every time anyone mentions the word, the price of Bitcoin goes up, because it's all connected. It's all the same idea. Bitcoin the coffee mug, Bitcoin the t-shirt, Bitcoin this Twitter Spaces. It's all part of the same organism and the same thought experiment, the same interpsychological whatever, and it's taking a hold of us, and it's a good thing. It's freeing us from the shackles of old, where we thought we had to run around in a hamster's wheel to please some fucking bureaucrat somewhere all the time. And we don't have to do that anymore. We could just be nice to each other. And it's so fucking beautiful when you start seeing it that way. And that's why I'm on this mission, for lack of another better word. I mean, spreading the love. All you need is love. The Beatles were right. All you need was love. We just hadn't found a mathematical equation for it yet, but now we have. And boom, that's my mic drop moment.
Holy
That's-
shit.
What
Yeah,
the?
fantastic.
That was
Amazing.
insane.
Wow.
You're welcome.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
that's awesome. What the heck?
Dee, I actually have a question for you. If you're at all interested in helping me dissect this. So again, that is so profound, what Knut just said, and on board, and we have some of the brightest minds in this space right now, and it's realistically like our goal to try and think about these things and troubleshoot them so that we can error correct and actually aim and land on that future that Knut just had. But I mean, if we're going to look at some type of, monster state in the future, whatever country, obviously I'm an American, and, there's an abundance of what have already been fabricated weapons, both in and outside of the military. These things already exist, and we will have to work with and around them in the brighter future that we're all trying to move towards. And
Preferably around them.
yeah, preferably, melt them all down and make the Simpsons, Rocky slides where you got AK-47s that make a children's playground. I'm sorry, that's a terrible reference. But is there any kind of future where states are able to create, essentially father seeds or father wallets, and then mandate their populations to use those and essentially have access to funds at any given time if things get too perilous for the state and they remove other people's funds once threatened? Is that anything, or am I just being a little too crazy? And right
Yeah,
now?
well, let me just first. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Knut.
Yeah, can I answer? I think the question was for me, so I'll try to answer it. You're living in a nation state right now, but you're also living in another new nation state called Bitcoin, and you can choose to abide by its rules or by the rules of the old paradigm. And if we have the choice, that's the key thing here. You can do what they tell you to do, and you can choose not to. And nation states that start to be harsh on Bitcoiners will, over time, they will fare much worse than nation states that take care of their Bitcoiners. I mean, this has already played out during the 20th century, where free market economies outpaced North Korea and the Soviet Union and so on. I mean, systems that don't work. And it can be proven that socialism and coercion and interventionism does not work over the long term. So the Bitcoin space and the Bitcoin nation, for lack of a better word, I dislike the word nation, but the Bitcoin nation will outpace all other nations because it's a better system. So you either adapt to this new reality or you pretend that it doesn't exist. It's your choice.
So D++, I think Michael asked you first, but I have kind of a technical explanation on what he was saying.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say, Knut, thank you for again tonight. Everything you said has just blown my mind. I think trying to wrap my head around hyper Bitcoinization is one of my favorite things, and I've been humbled, and I continue to be. And I think you probably are able to perceive of it better than maybe anyone. And I don't want to sound like a simp, but for that reason, I think you may be one of my favorite Bitcoiners. So thank you for that. What you said about Bitcoin is love. It's a mathematical equation for love. I find that to be profound, and I want to continue pulling this thread. So again, just thank you. But Michael, weapons and bombs are expensive, and Bitcoin is very, very scarce. And when you look at the price tag of these things, and you realize that Bitcoiners don't even have chairs because they've sold them all for Bitcoin, you have to convince these Bitcoiners to take the hardest money that has ever been, that will ever be, and buy bombs to harm people. And I don't think the Bitcoiners will want to do that. You can attempt to force them with violence, but violence is also costly because you have to pay people to enact it. And if you cannot have a silent tax in the form of inflation, how can you pay for violence? So I think when you think about like who's really footing the bill for this kind of thing, some of this maybe unravels. Now, with regard to a wallet, I mean, yeah, a government could have an XPriv, and we all each have some kind of derived XPriv from that. But I don't think we'd want to use those addresses because we wouldn't probably want to live in that country. And to Knut's point, we'd probably move somewhere else. At least I certainly would.
So I'll join the Knut's boat for this one. Knut's, you're a pretty cool pleb. So to Michael, real quick, your statement about governments with predetermined seeds. So the government gives you a seed phrase, and that's like your seed phrase. They wouldn't give you the seed phrase. They would just have an app on a phone that says you have Bitcoin. You'd never be allowed to touch the Bitcoin because the fact is, if they gave you the seed phrase or gave you any actual access to the Bitcoin, what could you do right away? You could just send it,
move it to another wallet. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think governments will ever kind of pull that move, like what you said. They'd most likely have just like this 3-letter app that you open up and you would spend your Bitcoin that was custodied by the government. But at that point, you're not actually using Bitcoin at all. You're trusting somebody else, which defeats the kind of entire purpose of it. I'm not saying they're not going to try to do something like that. But yeah, if you can, always get self-custody of that stuff.
It's called CBDCs. That's what they'll try.
Right.
So it's a form.
That's the prestidigitation therein is more what I'm very worried about. Mostly because, and I love the George Carlin quote, right? If you think about the average citizen or the average American, imagine how stupid they are, and then half of them are stupider than that. Some people are incredibly easy to fool, and especially because the current fiat system keeps them so busy that they truly cannot pay attention, right? And so if you can co-opt enough attention onto a system for a short enough window of time, because we all agree that, that this hyper-Bitcoinization is on track to happen. There's essentially a window of fragility where they can still seize power, but then there are also still weapons that have already been created, that already exist. And, so some of these weapons are nuclear and very worth taking seriously. If we can get through the next 100 years, the next 1,000, to 10,000 look very bright. But I'm looking at the, what we would call a 50-meter target of trying to get through this transition without too much kinetic warfare taking place, because that could be, catastrophic to humanity, and that's something that no one in this room wants to happen.
That's the fight we got to have. And on that note, I do hope that never happens, and I hope Bitcoin helps us avert this whole thing.
Yes, you and both.
On the topic of CBDCs, as mentioned, I don't think there will be willful adoption of them. I think it will be like a subsidy that gets people to do it. Like they'll subsidize their income. People will be struggling, and governments will kind of hand them these little chips or tokens and say, hey, take this. and kind of get their citizens dependent on these government tokens. That's my biggest thing about CBDCs, and if anybody has a counterpoint to that.
Yeah, and we will be there, and we will be toxic, and we will call them out. You can count on that. So when push comes to shove, and you have a choice to make here, make the right choice, people, and take your bitcoins off exchanges and custody your own Bitcoin. I mean, take custody and listen to the most toxic maximalists, because we're toxic for a reason, and it's an altruistic reason. We're not trying to destroy lives here. We're trying to save lives.
Accept the symbiote.
Yeah, it's already here. It's already here, and it's an agreement on a fixed set of rules. Bitcoin is many things. It's a new informational element. It's a potato. It's an agreement on a fixed set of rules. It's a symbiote. It's all of these things combined, and you choose to interact with it in any way you want. But if you even use the word Bitcoin, you are using Bitcoin. So keep on doing that.
Whoever said symbiote, that sort of hit on my question, because Knut, as you were describing earlier, Bitcoin, the idea, the memetics, and this, then I think you went into like symbiosis and all of that. The question kind of becomes, once you become like, this Venom character, is you and the idea, right? And you can spread it to people, unrelated to you and all of that. Have you ever thought about if sort of you create generations of symbiotes, does this thing ever become, or can it ever become hard-coded into DNA? You know what I mean? Because that's this thing with nurture and nature. I don't know if you've thought.
Yeah, I think it already is. I mean, this is an entire chapter of my latest book, Everything Divided by 21 Million, that you can find on Knutsvanholm.com.
I got both the hard and soft copy.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So the symbiote thing, I explain it like this. It's just like you say, we're all like Venom now. We live with an alien symbiote, and we're sort of codependent. Right now, Bitcoin is more dependent on us than we are dependent on Bitcoin. I mean, we could live a life without Bitcoin and survive, but Bitcoin could not live a life without us and survive. So that's the dynamics of the symbiote at this point. But over time, it will gradually shift to the other way around, or at least equal, that we won't be able to survive without our Bitcoins. So we are already engaged in a symbiotic relationship with this thing. Just having this debate is part of that symbiotic relationship. And we ingrained into the genetic code. That is a funny term to use, because the word meme was coined by the author of The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins, back in the 70s. And a meme is nothing but an idea that behaves like a gene, and all ideas do. So there are many similarities between how genes function and propagate and grow and survive to how ideas spread and propagate and survive. And there's another chapter about this in my book, so I really appreciate this question. But the way I see it, like, even bad ideas can survive, like suicidal bombing, for instance. That's an idea that is very bad for the one actually doing the bombing, because they die from it. Similar to how a beehive, a single bee dies from using a stinger, but he might save the beehive. And that is what I believe that suicidal bombers are trying to do, or whatever. But the point is that an idea can survive even if it's of detriment to its users, or it's the brain holding the idea. Like the idea of the nation state, which is very ingrained into our brains, and it survives over time when it's arguably bad for us. in the long run. Bitcoin is an idea that is in every aspect good for us. There's nothing bad for a person. In the idea of Bitcoin is not bad for the brains comprehending the idea, not at all. On the contrary, it's very good for its users, and it makes the user, the brain holding the idea, more inclined to think long term, to start a family, make sure that their kids survive. It's a very long term idea, and it's about survivability of the brain holding the idea. So I think this idea is so powerful, and since it benefits absolutely everyone grasping the idea, there's just nothing can stop this idea, because an idea whose time has come, there's nothing more powerful than that. And everything is an idea. Every tool, every innovation, every technology, everything we do starts with an idea. And when you find an idea that is this profound, you have to adapt to it, because it's not going away. It's like we just discovered the circle or something. That is an idea that is as powerful as Bitcoin. Like with the help of the circle, we could construct wheels. With the help of Bitcoin, we can construct sound money, which is even more profound than wheels. And we can find this private key to our hearts, as I was talking about before. So I think killing this idea is impossible. How could you? People have tried in many ways. The most successful attempt of killing this idea is to date is the introduction of shitcoins and altcoins and Bitcoin forks and whatnot, because they dilute the core idea, and they try to make people think that the idea is something else than what it actually was, which is the discovery of resistance to replicability among human brains. And when I say shitcoins are successful, I say I don't mean that they're actually successful. They're the most successful so far, and they're all laughably pale in comparison to Bitcoin. And they're all jokes, and we can all see that over time. So even the best attempt at trying to kill this thing is just a joke at this point. So how this symbiotic structure with this mathematical equation could go away, I just don't see that. It's like Pythagoras' theorem is not less true because people stop believing in it. It doesn't work that way. Reality is that we have this thing. We can organize ourselves according to these rules, and if we do, we're better off than if we don't. That's all you need to know. It's a discovery, and it can't be replicated.
Can I ask kind of a bit of a personal question? And if you don't want to answer this, of course, I'll understand. But does Bitcoin get you thinking about the divine?
It's at least 11 inches.
Oh my gosh.
Nice.
Oh my gosh.
Because it can't be 12, because then it becomes a foot.
I'm buying
I
your
thought it was
book.
21. Exactly 21, because everything divided by 21. You see?
So I'm wondering if Bitcoin gets you thinking about the divine. It seems that there's a lot of Bitcoiners who either already believed in God or sort of found God sort of through Bitcoin. Are you one of them? Do you maybe if that's too personal, but I'll let you decide if you want.
It's not personal. I'll gladly discuss it, but I don't. I think some other people in this room know where I stand on this issue, and that this might take a long time.
We got all the time in the world. I'll stay up till 6 till the sun comes up.
We have lots.
Okay.
Yeah, who's your favorite atheist, Knut?
My favorite atheist is probably Christopher Hitchens, and
rest in peace.
I'm an atheist, and I define that word as someone not believing in any religious story that has been told. It does not say anything else. That word in particular says nothing else about my own personal beliefs in anything else. It just says that I don't buy into the religious stories that I've been told so far, including statism, which is the latest incarnation of a religion in my belief. So I view Bitcoin as financial atheism, and I say that because Bitcoin is the first type of money where you don't have to trust in a higher power. A higher power's scarcity claims. You can verify the scarcity of your tokens, so you don't have to trust or believe in any of it. It's a way to shield yourself from superstition and like how psychopaths use that against us. Because I view religion as a tool that psychopaths use in order to rule people. You can see this in early civilizations. Whenever they invent ceremonial burial, they can fool the civilization grows rapidly, and this is because then the leaders of the tribe can fool their subjects or 18-year-olds into going to war with other tribes, and they do this by saying that there's an afterlife. And the thought of an afterlife is taking away the only thing that gives life value, which is the scarcity of human time. So in my opinion, if you were immortal and indestructible, you wouldn't have to act at all, because you could always postpone every action to a later point in time. So the only thing that is giving our lives value is that it's scarce, and we have only one shot at life. So in my view, any narrative that tries to dilute this, either by like the religions did, fooling people into you do this and that because you'll get a reward in the afterlife, or the latest incarnation of it, which is use our money, which we can print more of, which is basically the same thing. They're saying that this acquiring more of this token that represents something that isn't true will get you rewards in the here and now. They're the two aspects of the same coin. They're trying to make people do things that are not of their own choice. So
Hey,
I view
Knut,
Bitcoin as the perfect representation of the scarcity of human time, because only two things are absolutely scarce on Earth: your time on this Earth and your Bitcoins. Nothing even comes close to those two.
Knut, based on your writings and your description, I know you term yourself an atheist, but for some reason, I get a lot of like Buddhism vibes from you, because by the way, Buddhism isn't really a religion, right? True Buddhism. It's about observing flow, being introspective, understanding and being, stuff like that. So you're sort of resonating a lot of the same concepts. Yeah, that's all.
Knut, I'd like to talk on a bit about your profound kind of, not rant, but ongoing speech about Bitcoin being the love equation. It made me really think about how dirty and how deep the fiat system goes as well. I mean, hearing you say that Bitcoin, like you're using Bitcoin even if you don't own it, just by its existence, it started a timeline by its creation that no one's going to stop, and it has all those, deep causes of like the way it forces people to think certain ways and act certain ways. And I just
He accident. I think he dropped down actually, or did he?
I think he disconnected.
Yeah,
It sounded like he was walking.
just I didn't want you to keep talking if he.
I
You
hear
know what I
you.
mean?
either way, it just makes me
Man,
feel like how deep and dirty the fiat system has caused us, and I'm also glad that we all get to use Bitcoin, even if you've got none. So, all love.
absolutely. I mean, man, that was amazing what he was talking about, and I was just sitting back and wow, thank you guys for asking the all those great questions. That was amazing.
Hey, Physical, I want to spread some love here, and thanks for hosting this space. Pretty glad I joined. Great experience.
Yeah, I had no idea that, I was like, nothing was really going on for 20, 30 minutes and just talking to random, just nothing really happening. And then all of a sudden, Knut just showed up and, I didn't even, it wasn't planned or anything. And he just, really took it to the next level. And man, I'm still kind of in, contemplating it all. Maybe he'd be willing to let me, share some of those things in the future, because that was next level kind of conversation, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't try to sell him a few coasters while you're here.
I already did that, Portland. No, I'm just
Okay,
kidding.
cool.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm just kidding. I mean, no, I'm not. I've kind of chilled out with all that, and things are going real well. Or considering the markets and everything that's
I
going
was
on.
just, I was giving you a little crap.
No, I know, I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, what is anybody? What's going on? I'm not the best. This is the first time like really doing like a host where there, a bunch of people showed up too. So I just let it run and yeah.
Yeah, you're fucking crushing it.
Yeah, dude. I was gonna say I originally came in for the Bitcoin versus silver before Knut's joined in. If anybody wants to go back, but I don't think you're gonna have a tough time beating what just happened. I can't
Oh, I
provide
know,
that.
I know.
I can't
That's
provide
why
that
I
kind of.
put
Do you want Physical? You should just rug the room. Just,
yeah, exactly. Like we're done.
just
No,
end
I'm just kidding. I mean it's I
it.
mean
I'm
it's
just
the
kidding.
open discussion too. That's why I've
Mhm.
kind of evolved the title as the room went on and it's definitely it evolved in a way that I never expected. So that was super awesome. Maybe his phone died or something happened. It happened last night too. I think whenever um, Ozzy was hosting a space. So yeah,
Yeah, I think the section that I liked the most was I think D plus plus. You messaged me that quote was when he said the Beatles were right. All we need is love. We just hadn't found the mathematical equation for it yet. And that kind of like that whole section was just like most of it was really good. That was something else. Like that, like no
exactly. Yeah.
digestion needed. That was just straight up like right.
Hey, well, welcome back, Knut.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't say anything, Knut.
Thank you.
yeah,
My phone fucked up somehow, so I had to restart it.
yeah. Hey, well, real quick before just thank you for showing up out of the blue too, Knut. I think what's his name? Arben was asking or bringing up something.
Yeah,
Um,
I was just kind of touching about Knut, when you brought us to that conclusion that Bitcoin, that we all use Bitcoin simply by its creation, and it's kind of that answer, and that it all, that equation that we needed for love. I think it made me think about how deep and widespread in not only our personal thinkings, but then in our society, that the fiat system and its terrible setup has led us to. And even so much like a simple fact is when you learn how the fiat system runs, and you realize that this is the system that is running our nation states, it's a bit disheartening because you feel so detached and away from the inner workings and the structure that made that happen. And Bitcoin kind of realigns you to the truth and to the physics, and allows you to go back to study, what the elements are doing, what time is doing, and it started a new timeline that is just very pure and very refreshing. And it even when I think Millard's was mentioning bringing a biological DNA questioning to it. Yeah, DNA is cool, but I think day to day our society that we choose to live in and have to operate in is just as impactful. And I'm just excited to see where this timeline takes us, and hopefully these kind of shit coins that are trying to use this similar infrastructure and code and just I guess code that Bitcoin has without any of its real purity or foundation, because Bitcoin is really founded and grounded in physics and unbreakable truth. And like I said, this timeline, there's going to be duplicates, but I believe Bitcoin will prevail. But I am definitely going to hop on your books. I'm very intrigued.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
No, just admiration. And, rub out that 11-incher for you if you ever need it.
Well,
He wants the 11 inches.
So, Knut, I got another one.
Okay, go ahead.
Because code is the consensus upon which the Bitcoin network operates. Every block, tick tock, next block gets validated and relayed by nodes. Do you think the social consensus around what defines a Bitcoin node will change over a very, very, very long period of time? Like, do you still see nodes in the future still running basically the exact same consensus algorithm? Or do you think that there is some social construct within society to kind of implicitly like redefine rules or extend what is defined as Bitcoin, like the actual mathematics behind it? Does that make sense?
I think the answer to that question is flipping it 90 degrees and turning it. Because the first thing you're told about Bitcoin is that miners create Bitcoin, which is a misinterpretation of how the thing works. Because it's not actually the miners; it's the nodes that employ the miners to create Bitcoins for them, and they're paying the miners in a certain amount of Bitcoin for doing this service for them. But the thing is that Bitcoin flips this on its head too. It flips itself on its head, because then to tie into your question, what is a node? And that is up to the Bitcoin users to define. So it's not even the node owners that create Bitcoin, but it's all of us, and we're all redefining and defining what it is at all times by having these conversations about it. So because everything is tied, all the code is speech and mathematics is also just a form of speech. So it's all tied to the social interactions between people, and that is the input and the output. So it's the users of Bitcoin that define what Bitcoin is, and it goes even deeper than that, because it's the future users, and it's every no coiner also defines what a Bitcoin is, because it's the conversation around it that creates it, and it's the social interactions between people that define what it is and what comes out of it. So in my view, there's no clear distinction. Each individual actor plays a certain role in this experiment, and they're all important to a larger or a lesser degree, but no one, not even Peter Schiff or Craig Wright, is outside of the definition of what a Bitcoin is. It's all part of a social consensus between people. So there's no distinction there.
Thank you.
Knut,
this would be an interesting link to the question that Dee brought up some minutes ago about believing in the divine and so on. I found, for me at least, an interesting link between actually religion and faith and Bitcoin on the other side, because there's some kind of a similarity, I would say, being that how to put it, it feels like people try to define what it is, and you already said, so we define we define what Bitcoin for us is, but at the same time it's super hard to do so, right? So for example, create a label like it's digital gold, it's encrypted energy, and so on, which is not entirely wrong, but it's also not entirely true. So And for me, it feels a little bit like a similarity, right? So some people reject the idea of religion and faith because of the religious structure, of the attempts to define what the religious experience actually is. And using that definition, I would say, yeah, I'm also more like an atheist. But then there's people that do not focus on the structure. They just build the structure to enhance the religious experience. And the religious experience having, yeah, let's call it having faith, then it's a whole different story that I would count myself also in. So that's a little bit strange. And it feels like this is a similarity to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, I mean, it's a great experience, right? So we all experience that. So it's yeah, it unlocks so much for individuals, and people try to describe it. And as we try to describe it, we create yeah, ideas, more simple labels to get closer to it, but ultimately we never get to it, right? So we just experiencing it, and experiencing Bitcoin, that's somehow the truth. Everything else is just, yeah, we try to build the tools to get closer to that.
Yeah,
What's your
yeah,
take on that?
yeah. That's sort of what I was. That's why I was so. I had to define my interpretation of the word atheism before I said. After having just said I was an atheist, because words have so much different meanings to different people, and words get diluted. There's no way of communicating precisely with another person. I mean, the closest thing we have is mathematics, but not even that. I mean, you have Gödel's incompleteness theorem proving that not even that can be a perfect means of communication. So defining words is very important. And to me, being an atheist is just rejecting those stories and those theories that most religious people subscribe to. The instances in which I can agree with someone claiming to be religious is when they've made such a departure from the original texts, such a big leap from them, so that they aren't really religious, but they're saying that God is decentralized or whatever, and they construct a worldview that fits their own personal little box. And I know that there are lots of religious Bitcoiners, and I know that religion serves as some sort of a counterpoint to the latest incarnation of it, which is statism. And in that, I agree with the religious people that belief in a supernatural being is probably better or less worse than a belief in a divine being here on earth that can fix problems for you. I mean, Texas is a better place to live than North Korea, but that does not necessarily make these assumptions true. And I think the search for truth is something that is perpetual in human beings, and we try to get closer to it and try to find whatever it is. And I think even the word truth has something to do with semantics, and it's the most binary part of our language. Whether something is true or false, that's the deepest level of communication we have. That's binary speak. Something is either true or false, and we define what's true and false by this dichotomy in the language we use. This is, I'm babbling off here on some sidetrack things, but I do understand why people compare Bitcoin to religious experience, and it's the closest thing I've ever had to one by far, because it certainly feels as if the stars are all aligned, and just the last year of my life, ending up on Michael Saylor's yacht and befriending a prince and a president and all of this thing, those are things that I would never have dreamt of would like just 2 years back. So so it certainly feels like there's a purpose to all of this, but I'm still reluctant to believe that there is an actual purpose to it. I have a strong belief in that coincidences happen. But I do believe that quantum mechanics is true, and that there is an observer, and that observer can alter reality to some extent by focusing on one thing rather than the other. And we don't know to which extent this is true, and this goes back to Rene Descartes and I think therefore I am, which is basically says that the only thing that you can actually prove is that some thinking is going on somewhere. But living out your life, you realize that acting is as if other beings existed, and that they were similar to you in that they had to have a value judgment preceding their every action. You get a better outcome over time. So I derive my morality and all of that purely from praxeology and from acting as if other acting beings, acted for the same reasons as I did. So that's as close to religion as I get. I'm trying to be mindful, and I've meditated quite a bit, and gotten to know my own brain and how it works. And it's a cacophony in there, voices all the time telling me different things. I'm playing strange music, and different ideas popping up all the time, distracting me from what I'm doing. But when I'm in the zone, and when I'm writing or playing music or something that gives me pleasure, having sex with my 11-inch or whatever, then I feel like I'm in the moment and truly alive. Yeah, even this conversation is as close to a spiritual experience as I'll ever get. I get to live this moment and to express myself, and that gives me a lot of gratification. But yeah, everyone has a different definition of the word religion, and the part I'm scared about is when people start believing the same thing. So when there's a consensus upon that this particular story about Genesis or whatever is the true one, that's when I get suspicious about it. And Bitcoin is not that. Because in Bitcoin, the map defines the territory, which is the first time that has ever happened. What is true in Bitcoin is defined by what we decided happened in Bitcoin by agreeing on this fixed set of rules. So we all agree that this is truthful, and it becomes truthful because of our agreement and not the other way around. So Bitcoin is a different beast altogether, and I think it should not be confused with religion or even a philosophy. It's a completely new paradigm, and like there is no better word for describing Bitcoin than Bitcoin. It is what it is, and we choose to interact with it however we want, and the more we interact with it, the better off we are, probably. That's my answer.
Thanks, love it.
Go for it, Portland. Or anybody else. I think Mallards, or sorry if I'm butchering your name. You've been up here and you kind of said you had something you wanted to ask at one point.
Yeah, I can't even remember what it was. I've just been kind of fascinated by the conversation. But
right.
yeah, I mean, I guess we were talking about kind of Bitcoin and kind of this religious angle, ostensibly. I mean, one thing that maybe for me that kind of seems, I mean, it might be for me, like when you talk about Bitcoin and religion, it kind of seems like anybody know what the theory of the intransigent minority is?
I don't.
Yeah, it's basically this theory that the intransigent minority, like people think that changes to society and culture originate from the center mass, but they don't. They actually originate from the poles. And you kind of see this, think about, say, Christianity, back when Christians were just a loud, radical Jewish sect. Or for my lifetime, rappers coming out of, say, the late 80s. You know, these two groups, respectively, people wanted either crucified or put in prison. And that's where the changes come from. It's, you know, if these people would have been quiet and said, okay, yeah, you know, we'll keep it in our parents' basement or keep it in the cave, you know, what would have become of the religion? What would have become of the ideas? And I mean, that's kind of how I view maxis, I guess, maximalism, Bitcoin maximalism.
Yeah, good point. I totally agree with that. And that's something about with a religious aspect and the idea of a creator having to have created everything. And you can say that Satoshi created Bitcoin, but I don't really agree with that. I think Bitcoin emerged out of a couple of actions that a couple of people took, Satoshi being one of them, but not the only one of them. And to me, Bitcoin wasn't really Bitcoin until after the Bitcoin, the Bcash fork in 2017, which was a cross between a train robbery and a Christmas gift. And when that turned out to be a joke and fell flat on its face and showed people what people were truly made of, that's when I realized that this thing is real and it can deliver on the promises it seems to make. And that's when my generation of Bitcoiners was born, I guess, and we're fortifying that message. And that was part of the emergence of Bitcoin. So I think it's something that rather, it's more like, I hate the comparison between a creator and evolution because they don't really, they're not really comparable at all. Because one is the observation of a phenomenon and the other one isn't. And the emergence of Bitcoin, I think, is very much akin to evolution and the emergence of a new phenomenon coming from other phenomenons. Like someone had to discover cryptography and someone had to discover game theory and someone had to discover something else. Otherwise, it would never have happened.
Portland, are you still here, Portland? Oh, sorry, my phone. Sometimes it doesn't show everybody that's up on the stage. That's very interesting. I like the way that that's all worded there.
I was going to ask a question about, I guess, kind of going back a little bit to silver and gold. About, say, you know, like at least like in the United States, you know, silver and gold are legal tender in Utah, Louisiana, Texas, I believe now. And one of the biggest differences between those monies and Bitcoin is that, you know, Bitcoin isn't just this deflationary asset. It's also a payment network. And, you know, perhaps like over a long enough period of time, it just becomes merges with language. But there's this conversation, like even amongst maxis, about Bitcoin as legal tender. I can't get a beat on it. Like, is like on our way towards hyper Bitcoinization, is legal tender a goalpost? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I'm confused about that.
Yeah, I have an answer to that too. Surprise, surprise. Legal tender is a word that is only applicable to the legacy system. It makes no sense in a hyper Bitcoinized world because, like, money emerged before nation states did. People discovered that they needed a medium of exchange in order to get past the mutual coincidence of needs that was needed before that, which is my 3 goats for your 1 cow and so on. So they needed something to use to facilitate trade with people they didn't trust, and therefore money was invented or discovered, however you frame it. So the whole notion of legal tender or KYC or anything that monitors like what we do with our money and determines what money we're able to use defeats the entire purpose of original purpose of money, which is removing trust from the 2 interacting parties. We use cash to take away the need to know the other person you're interacting with. When you're interacting with your family or your friends, you can just trust them, and you can give them something, and you can be sure at one point in the future you'll get something back from them, something of value. And that's all money is. It's a way to trust people that you don't know. So in that sense, I mean, legal tender, it's a temporary term. It's a transitory term that will disappear on a Bitcoin standard because no one will use the term or need it. Why would you care if your money is legal or not when whatever they say is legal isn't working anymore? And this is already the case in Venezuela and Cuba and places like that, where people prefer to use something else than what the government tells them is the correct thing to use. So I think the term legal tender is, from an old paradigm.
The term legal tender is actually it's just a sign of the centralization of money, I would say, right? It's just an artifact of that.
Exactly. If anyone tells you you can't use anything but this to exchange value with each other, that's censorship. That's what it is. They're censoring your ability to express yourself. Money is speech. It's how we express value to each other. So it's legal tender is a form of censorship.
Yeah, that was a really good answer.
I just wanted to mention if there's anybody there that's listening and would want to come up as well, feel free to request, and we'll make that happen.
I think also legal tender is a censorship because it's like the forced base you use to give value to assets. Like the reason why legal tender makes no sense other than its play in the nation state is if I give you an item or an asset or if I give you something, according to the nation state, it has a value denominated in their legal tender in which there may be taxes or difference or gain based on their application of the currency. I don't know if that makes sense, but I also think legal tender is bullshit.
It does. Like whatever you choose to buy with your money is also money, just the worst form of it. If you buy a sweater, you can sell that sweater, and then that sweater is money. There's it's semantics and a play on words that states use to manipulate our psyches and try to avoid the term.
It reconstrains you back to their choice, right?
And I mean, you see that legal tender actually is a way of centralizing and censoring money. You see that with El Salvador, actually, right? So as soon as Bitcoin became legal tender, which I think is a good thing in total, but as soon as this happened, it became an attack vector for people criticizing Bitcoin. They basically then came with, and I think that's not a completely wrong criticism. They said, how inclusive is this now? So people are forced, which is, if you look at it in detail, I think it's bullshit. But still, it became an attack vector because people know intuitively that making something legal tender is actually, to some degree, a step of centralizing something. So which I think in total is not possible with Bitcoin, but yeah, it's an indication, I would say.
Absolutely, and I understand, but the critique should be like critique El Salvador's government, if anything, for that. It's not a critique against Bitcoin; it's a critique against the actions of the people in El Salvador's government. And you can view that as good or bad. I personally think that this thing is going to play out in one way or another. And this is the first. This is how it actually played out. The first step. This is the first nation state that did this. Other nation states will also make this move, but that doesn't change Bitcoin, not a single bit. It just makes people more aware of it, because as I said before, everything surrounding Bitcoin is also Bitcoin. So when people talk about El Salvador, they're helping Bitcoin succeed. So I view it as a good thing, while at the same time I'm totally against the notion of legal tender as a concept.
Say, like, taking it one step further, would you say then that as well, global reserve currency is also this legacy term?
Absolutely. There is, and the Bitcoin standard is also wrong. With Bitcoin, we have no need for standards anymore. This is, I mean, and we don't need to put it in a law book. It makes its own reality, and it makes its own rules. So everything, every legacy term that you try to squeeze on top of that is just, some of them are better than others, but most of them are misleading.
Yeah, exactly. So, maybe you've game theoried some of these possibilities out, but, say Bitcoin continues to monetize, it continues to grow. Maybe we get this scaling layer that liquefies it, and, this unit of account thing, means of exchange, Lightning Network, whatever. As it grows, I mean, do you still have this legacy system, extant? And as Bitcoin grows, it kind of gives people, for the first time perhaps ever, the option to opt out, which I'm not so sure anything else has existed that can do that. And then it kind of starts to perhaps compete with public debt, which then kind of challenges the way states organize. I mean, do you see kind of this, difficult transition period, or just this really kind of slow burn where everybody slowly migrates?
I see it playing out faster than previous transitions in monetary paradigms. But then again, I still think it'll take centuries, because I don't really see an end point. And I think we've only begun to scratch the surface of what's imaginable here and what this can lead to in the long run. And I don't know if you were part of the beginning of this conversation, where I went into how the necessity for transactions will go down over time and not up, and how Bitcoin enables us to interact with each other without using money at all. But there are some really deep rabbit holes to deep dive into here, and I think we're on the we're at the starting point of something truly profound that no one on earth can really grasp what it implies in the long run. But of course it will eat all the debt in the world, and of course it will destroy the nation state. That's the start. The funny thing to think, the real profound things to think about, is what happens after that. To the question of whether the transition will be violent or not, that ties into the other aspects of Bitcoin disincentivizing violence, and that's a view I have that I think most other maxis don't have, and I want this thing to play out as fast as possible. most people, a lot of Bitcoiners say that they want a slow transition in order to make it more peaceful. But I think a faster transition would actually be more peaceful, because what we're living in now is not peaceful. You're having someone is pointing a gun to your head, regardless of where you live, and telling you to pay for things that you haven't expressed that you want to pay for. That is the current reality we're living in, and the faster we get out of that, the faster we get out of violence. There's no getting around that, and the crash in fiat currencies is coming anyway. And without Bitcoin, that is very, very violent, because that leads to hyperinflation and civil unrest, and that happens to all fiat currencies, including the US dollar and including the pound and everything else. No fiat currency has ever survived. They all die at some point. As long as there's a money printer, there's no future for that currency. So I think the faster we get to hyper Bitcoinization, whatever that is, the better, because that is the smoothness of the transition. And what's on the other side is a very beautiful world in which we are more capable of loving each other in, since we don't have to run in a hamster's wheel and be scared of each other all the time.
Team, I've got to jump off. It's about 2:30 my time, or well, almost 3 o'clock my time. Thank you so much for all the riveting conversation. We've got so many bright minds here that I've, just garnered so much and continue to learn from each and every one of you. Knut, thank you so much for the wise words. And forming community is something that is definitely a benefit of, this new paradigm, which we're all embracing on our own individual journeys. But, it's much more enjoyable and informative when we all do it together. So thank you very much, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
On that point, 2 generations back, I wouldn't speak your language. My grandparents spoke Swedish and not English. So even there, the internet has just made us connect. Everyone on Earth is connecting better and better all the time. And Bitcoin is a part of that, a huge part of that. We're all becoming one civilization for the first time ever. And with civilization, I mean people who act civilized. That is, they're not threatening other people to do stuff for them. They're voluntarily interacting with each other, or in another word, trading with each other. So yeah, it's all true. If money doesn't cross borders, and if speech doesn't cross borders, armies will. So this is it. This is what we're doing. We're interacting peacefully, exchanging information with each other. That is all money is, and that is all civilization is. What they used to call money, the fiat tokens, were not really money. They were scams and pyramid schemes, and we shouldn't use them anymore.
Absolutely. Hey, Bright Ray, what's going on with you?
Yeah, I was just wanted to follow up on that discussion regarding religion, because I think that time preference has gone like hand in hand with how religious a society is. And like when I observe how like regions of the world that have like energy stored, for example oil, they tend to be more religious. If you look at the Islamic community and the countries that are Islamic, Saudi Arabia is even a monarchy in one sense. So I understand your points there, Knut, with nation states being some form of religion, and we don't need more of those, kind of that thought process. But my belief is that, and even the discussion regarding afterlife is interesting, where you said that you dilute the value of your life if you think that there's an afterlife. But I think that what has happened with Western society is that I used to think that technology was the reason that we abandoned religion. But when Bitcoin came around, I realized that it's not technology. I mean, technology has always been evolving, and people didn't go away from their religious beliefs. It's only time preference that can make a person go away from their religious beliefs or their traditions, because you have so much focus on surviving or staying afloat that you forget to focus long term. So I really believe that as Bitcoin grows, I think societies or people, individuals will become more religious. And which religion or belief they pick, I don't know. But I really do believe that time preference is directly linked with beliefs in a higher power. And if you go from more like philosophical standpoint, I think therefore I am, as you mentioned, Knut. I mean, if you say that you have the ability to think of something that is right or wrong, and you can say that you believe that something is right or wrong, I do believe that you are actually thinking that you are more than just cells and molecules, because you can reason, and also I believe that we have lost a lot of like morals and values that I don't think governments can teach us. I think that if you think of a village and a family as a starting point of a civilization, I think a religion is some form of collective, collection of thoughts that several generations have passed on to make sure that people don't make mistakes that they cannot learn from in a single lifetime. So that's what I think religion is a lot of the time, is that you as an individual, you can't afford to make the mistakes in one lifetime. So therefore you can basically gather information from something that has been taught in generations. And I don't think that governments have done a good job in replacing that moral compass that religions gave people before.
I agree with a lot of that, but I don't see how a belief in a creator is necessary to come to the same conclusions. I think for many people it might be very well be so that they cannot think in these terms without the notion of a creator, but I personally can attest to that no such belief is needed in order to act morally. And I think you can derive morality from reason if you start from praxeology and you admit that if you act as if other people had the same value hierarchy system in their brains as you do, you're all better off in the long run. And you'll enjoy the ride, your own personal ride, more. So that's where I derive my morals from, and do with that whatever you like. But I can attest to that there's no need for the notion of a creator in order to get to that point.
Hey,
I think that
on that point, Knut, is there anyone else that's written about this with regard to atheism and Bitcoin that you could point us to? Or is it just...
I think I'm pretty lonely on this, pretty alone on this hill at this point. I hope that more will be written about it, because it's kind of a heavy load, because I understand why many or even most Bitcoiners are religious, and that is because like religion has functioned as a counterpoint to its latest incarnation, which is statism, for a long period of time, 100 years. So that is what people who clung on to religious beliefs instead of buying the statist narratives had a natural resistance to statist bullshit and clown world bullshit to a larger extent than those who didn't. But I'm telling you that there is a third way, if you will, in which you rid yourself of all appeals to authority, not only appeals to authority on this earth, but all of them. You can do that, and religious people should take notes, because you might think that the only thing you believe in is a divine being, but this divine being that you believe in is being used by many psychopaths to dictate your behavior. and the notions and the stories surrounding it is being used as a technology against you. So that's my warning to religious people, I guess.
Yeah, I really wondered what the correlation was between religion and Bitcoiners, and that's why I asked you. So thank you for your answer. I've always kind of felt like the belief in a creator was a little bit anti the mantra of don't trust, verify. So I was wondering, if anyone had kind of thought about that or written about that. But ultimately, Bitcoin is decentralized and Bitcoin is money, and every person on earth needs some form of money, and that includes folks who are religious and who aren't. But it's a fascinating topic. So thank you for sharing your thoughts.
I don't really like the word decentralized, and especially not in that context that Bitcoin is decentralized. The only thing that decentralization in Bitcoin achieves, it's a means to a greater end. It's an unfortunate means to a greater end. And we need decentralization because we can't trust in a single entity making sure that there's only 21 million units of this token. That's why we need decentralization, to solve the Byzantine generals problem in order to prevent double spending. And we need the decentralization for that in order to secure the finite amount of tokens in Bitcoin. So decentralization in itself is just a means to an end for this very specific purpose. So I prefer to call Bitcoin distributed rather than decentralized, because some people hold more Bitcoin and some people hold less Bitcoin. That's not really decentralization of buying power or anything like that, and it shouldn't be like that. I'm reluctant to use the term because I think it gets thrown around a lot, and people misinterpret what the decentralization in Bitcoin really does and really achieves.
It's interesting. I haven't really heard anyone take on that. Makes sense though.
Also, I think it's a difficult term to use because in my view, it's that centralization and decentralization are just internally linked, right? So they are linked in an internal loop. So a decentral system, so broad definition of system, right? So also social system and so on. I think a decentralized system will always breed some degree of centralization because it has its benefits, like the bee that stings and dies from it, right? And on the other side, every centralized system, as soon as it gets too centralized, basically will lead to its own death, if you will. So we see that with fiat, which is a highly decentralized system. So the reason why fiat will die is not because of Bitcoin. It will die anyway. Bitcoin is just our opportunity to make this transition go smooth and have something better at the end of it. And I think that's why I understand your sentiment, Knut, to not use that term of decentralized, because actually a total decentralization might not even be possible. And maybe just to touch on what you said, it's a funny thing is, for me, it's the same with religion, right? So it's this point of that you brought up, being at a counterpoint to statism. And the interesting thing is, you can actually, so it's to some degree against don't trust, verify, but at the same point, it's because you cannot verify there's a God or something or not, or something like this, right? So obviously, but at the same time, it's also an opportunity to trust and verify when it comes to the religion between to the relation between myself as an individual and the nation state, because religion also points you to actually tapping into your own experience, right? So what do you feel about what's happening here? And this is a counterpoint to statism. It can be, at least. So, but of course, it can also be abused by malicious psychopaths who just change the framing and the definition of what religion actually is. So it's quite interesting. Yeah, just babbling around. So stop.
Babbling a bit more on the same topic or similar topics. Like I said before, that everything starts as an idea, and this includes religions and nation states. In the beginning, man made God. I think this idea, as every other idea, which turn into a tool and to a technology, they're all there to save us time and to save someone time somewhere. And religions could save someone time somewhere, and it could save a lot of people a lot of time because it solved a certain section of conflicts and a certain section of issues in society. But it saved the most time for those on top of it. I mean, arguably Catholicism saves the Pope more time than anyone else and frees up more time for him. So the introduction of Bitcoin is like the introduction of something that can be directly related to the scarcity of your time, your personal time. And it ties into everything else because you can buy everything with money. So you can free up your time. We don't really crave more stuff. We crave whatever that stuff, what we believe that stuff will bring us in the future. We don't buy a sofa because of the sofa. We buy the sofa because we want to lay down on it. We don't even buy a Gucci bag because of the bag itself. We buy a Gucci bag because we can signal to other women that we are an alpha woman and that we can mate with the richest alpha male or something along those lines. The point being is that everything we create in order to save someone time somewhere. So it all ties back to time, and that is what Bitcoin is a perfect representation of, which is why even the word money is sort of misleading. It's a token to represent the scarcity and the value you yourself assign to your limited time on this earth, regardless of your belief in creator or creators or anything else. Yeah, that's.
Wow, I really liked how you talked about these systems allowing those at the top to utilize time-saving processes, whereas, like you said, the Pope, yeah, like how you described that. But then you said Bitcoin allows people to basically take control of their time. And to me, that reminds me of how you said the distribution rather than decentralization. So it's not an unwinding and a throwaway of the processes that allowed the quote-unquote Pope in the top to save time with all these things, but instead it distributes straight to the individual, basically that choice and control over their time. I'm not sure if that connects, but it's interesting. I also really liked your not disdain, but discomfort with decentralization as a saying, because I feel like people who have been winning or others who don't necessarily see the evil in the centralized system and actually will see guardrails and useful parts of the centralized system, they tend to think that when we come at them with this idea of decentralization, that we are supporting, some sort of disarray or some opposite of the centralized, nice system we have now. Because I always question if decentralization was always the answer, then how come we have gotten to such a centralized point, like quote unquote, when people try to use decentralization as such a cutting, bleeding edge. So I do really like that. It's interesting. I don't know how. Yeah, there's more to think about here.
That ties into socialism and the Soviet Union and the workers' control of factories. That's a form of decentralization, and that didn't work at all. So, like, a free market is not decentralized. It tends to specialization, which is centralization in certain areas, and thereby enabling the division of labor and a better outcome for everyone. So, and that's a good thing. So the decentralization in Bitcoin is only there to enable us to form hierarchies from merit rather than from political influence. So via the free market. So that's the end, and decentralization is the means to that, which is like the best parts of communism and the best parts of capitalism all baked into one. If you can put it like that. I don't think there are any best parts of communism except for the lols, which are sort of get stuck in your throat when you think about the gulags and the people with pink hair. But yeah, that's my take on decentralization.
So I want to chime in real quick on the technicalities of decentralization and distributed networks. Satoshi did not use the term decentralization in his white paper. He used the term distributed. And I think you're correct on that. The one thing I think you might be incorrect about is the reason why. The reason for decentralization is, first of all, censorship resistance, is the fact that if you have nodes distributed across the world, no one single entity can essentially chop off a portion of the network. You mentioned the act of validating the number of coins in existence. That is a good portion of decentralization because that's a part of validating blocks. So when the block goes into the node goes, okay, you're applying the rules for your epoch, so the halving cycle, and your basically your coin-based reward matches. So therefore, okay, I accept your block and I'll relay it. The second thing is when you have these decentralized nodes, they also each store a copy of the blockchain, or time chain as I like to call it. So when you have a bunch of nodes distributed all across the world, you would have to kill off all of the nodes to destroy somebody's transactions, because that's the value of the time chain, is all the records of history that have been written into this immutable ledger. And having that distributed across basically space, physical land, and yeah, so if you have even one copy that still exists, your node would relay that to other nodes, and other nodes would go, wow, this is the longest chain, I accept this, and then you move on to the next one. So that was my thought on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I got to the equals sign in the mathematical equation a bit too quick. Of course, what I was aiming at is like, you need the decentralization to solve the double spending problem. But the part I left out was what you just said, that a huge part of that is preventing any one actor from taking control of all of the nodes, which is where decentralization comes in.
Yep, and that's
so you're absolutely right about that.
Yep,
and I don't disagree at all. I just I chose the quicker path to explain it. But my main takeaway is that decentralization is there in order to prevent double spending in the end, and thereby securing this finite token cap.
Yep.
I make an argument in the book that the double spending problem has not really been solved until we're in a hyper Bitcoinized world, because as people are still using things that can be inflated, we aren't really using, or we haven't really solved the double spending problem on a global scale. Double spending is still going on, because I view inflation as a form of double spending. It's partial spending.
Hello?
Yeah, I dropped out there for a sec. Inflation is partial spending. So, yeah.
You're kind of cutting out there a bit.
Someone tried to call me. Don't worry about it. So.
Oh, okay.
Inflation is partial double spending. That's where I'm getting at. And so before hyper-Bitcoinization, double spending is still going on. And that particular problem hasn't been solved until we're on a Bitcoin standard all over the world.
Thank you, Knut. Yeah, I just want to point that out. Maybe I just jumped to conclusions.
I've got a question. Okay, I'm trying to see how to aim this at, because you've got a book kind of written by the whole thing, so I don't want to get too much in here. But why do we say 21 million when we can pretty much verifiably say that there's less than 21 million due to lost coins?
We can never know the exact number. The reason we say 21 million is because that equation makes for a much better logo than anything else.
I mean, I've got in my bio
yeah,
infinity over less than 21 million, and I feel like isn't that much
yeah,
more
but
truthful?
it's very much more truthful, but there is no fixed number. The number is constantly going down of coins that are actually accessible on the market. And this is what everyone gets wrong. Bitcoin is deflationary, especially on a long time frame, and coins will be lost. People will die with their coins in their heads, and exchanges will be taken down, and people will dump hardware wallets on. Coins will get lost over time, and 90% of the coins have already been mined. So everyone underestimates the upcoming SAT squeeze. And I believe that like 20 years from now, there will be less than 1 million Bitcoins for us to trade with. But that's a good thing. And that's even harder to wrap your head around, because that makes that increases the scarcity of the available tokens on the market, making each one of them more valuable. And since they're infinitely divisible on the Lightning Network, we could run the entire world economy on one Satoshi, or maybe not one, but 100,000 Satoshi, just to keep the miners going for fees for the really large transactions of 2 Satoshis. But theoretically, and a lot of I think it was Hayek that wrote about this, or maybe Mises, I don't remember, about you could run an entire world economy on just one token as long as it's divisible. So it's not really a problem. It's the solution to a problem. It's the solution to the inflation problem. You just have a fixed number and make it infinitely divisible.
I was going to say on the 21 million idea, I like to use 21 million because it's the mathematical number of coins that are in existence, not that are available. And I would just like to rather use that number, and what's available is more like a bonus as the deflationary pressure on Bitcoin. But the total number in existence is close to 21 million.
Yeah, and this is also an approximation. It's more like 20,900,000 something. We've all seen that number, but that number is also wrong, because the reward from the Genesis block was unspendable. So the first 50 Bitcoins in existence can never be spent.
And I think there's one other block that contains a small unspendable portion of that block. I'm sorry, I don't know that one off the top of my head.
I think perhaps
You're right. You're a blockchain historian.
There's also a block that had a 12.5 Bitcoin block reward that went to an invalid address. So that's taken out of circulation.
Okay, so are we using 21 million as a representation, as like that is the truth of the number in its creation, but just because we define it and as our little, egotistic human brains that it's unusable or unreachable, then that does not give enough validity to discount it from the 21 million? That
I would say, yeah. The reason why I'm going to say that is because I'm going to use the biggest pot of unavailable Bitcoin we discuss typically, and that's Satoshi, because he has roughly around 1 million to 1.2 million Bitcoin that are unavailable. But can you provably say that Satoshi's never going to be able to spend those ever? Can you prove that those keys don't exist somewhere? That his heirs didn't receive a little slip of paper or a USB thumb drive with a wallet, and that one day those will be spendable? Like, there are some coins that are provably pretty much lost. Like, a guy has a hard drive in a dump somewhere in the middle of Europe. There's another guy with a iron key flash drive that has 2 password attempts left. But that doesn't exclude the fact that there is a chance that those may come back. And my final note is that in the very long term, and this is kind of like a little bit of a FUD thing, but quantum computers in the future may be able to basically kind of reverse public key hash cryptography. So Satoshi's addresses are all to pay to public key hashes, right? And so those public keys directly can drive private keys if you are able to reverse the operation through a quantum computer.
Up.
Nope.
To that point, let's debunk that FUD immediately.
Okay.
Because quantum computers in hacking the SHA-256 algorithm will also hack every other system on Earth. So all
Okay.
other types of money are fucked as well in a situation like that.
So-
And in Bitcoin, let me finish,
Okay.
please. In
Sorry.
Bitcoin, at least we have a chance to upgrade the network in time and to maybe disregard 3 blocks and start over again with a better hashing algorithm. There is no chance to do that in any other system. So Bitcoin is the only thing that has a plausible chance of success in the event of a quantum computing attack. And all you could do was double spend a couple of coins, by the way.
No, you're correct on that. But I'm just saying from a technical perspective that you could theoretically, with enough computing power, basically mine Satoshi's blocks into existence again. On the next spend, though, you would be doing a taproot transaction or like a SegWit transaction, at which point it'd be very difficult to reverse those transactions doing that same method. It's just those pay-to-public key hashes that are typically deemed to be the most vulnerable to that. But yeah, you're right, you could. But at that point, you would be doing one thing. You'd be hard forking the network at that point. The original Bitcoin implementation would no longer be backwards compatible.
But you also need to have economic merit to that. So I think the point Knut is getting at is, at some point, even though it's a little bit delayed, maybe you are able to adapt to the new possibilities and adapt the algorithm basically. Until then, I would assume that someone who has a quantum computer has to spend a lot of resources to deploy that. And then again, we are in Bitcoin's game theory, right? So is it economically feasible? And I would say the likelihood is very low for that.
Yes, because it would destroy it, like any other attack on this agreement on a fixed set of rules between people. If the attack is successful, you dilute the value of the entire Bitcoin network, and therefore it would not be profitable for you to do so in the long run. So no attacker has an incentive to destroy the system. Which is not true for the Fed. So I like to tie it back to quantum computing destroying everything else as well. Bitcoin is the only thing that has a chance of survival in that scenario in terms of cryptography. So that's reality, and that's where I'm going to. That my bet is on Bitcoin and not on the other things that are around. It's orders of magnitude more secure than any other type of money, especially in that type of scenario.
Yes, I just wrote that down. I'm taking notes. No attacker has an incentive to destroy the system. I love that. That's what I love about the game theory of Bitcoin, when people come out with all of these like attack vectors of what if nation states collude to 51%, and it's just like there's just no incentive to do it. But Portland, also, I don't really like this idea that Satoshi's coins are vulnerable, because as I'm sure you know, you have to reveal the pub key with any spend of any address type anyway. So, you know, in this like scary quantum future, like anything would be sort of vulnerable. But I'm not really one to believe that Bitcoin is at threat by any stretch of the imagination by quantum computing.
And who would accept Satoshi's coins as payment for anything, given the risk that it involves accepting them? I find that very hard.
Would there be?
Sorry?
What risk would that involve? I mean, what do you mean by risk? Like,
I think if Satoshi's coins move, I wouldn't give a shit, but many people would, and they would think that Bitcoin is under attack somehow. And they would be scared, and Bitcoin's value would go down drastically for a short amount of time. So whenever you pay something for something with Satoshi's coins, there's a high likelihood that the value of the entire network goes down, and that person that sold you something would want that thing back, because you could buy it like a nation with that amount of money. So I think it's very, 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 very unlikely. The more likely scenario is that Satoshi has more coins than he revealed, if he's alive, that is. and I do believe it's a he because I'm not a feminist. I think it's plausible that it's a he. I accept the possibility that it's a woman, but this is beside the point. I'm saying that if Satoshi is alive, he probably has a lot of bitcoins, and those bitcoins aren't known to be Satoshis. He knows that people know of his initial coins, but what's been stopping him from acquiring more coins later on after that and being immensely rich at this point? And there are other ways of making money than just buying Bitcoin. Maybe he was a really good crypto trader as well. You can't know these things, and that's the whole point. You don't know, and that's a good thing.
Maybe it's you. Maybe he was a boat seller, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he made a fortune, captaining the yacht that took Greta Thunberg to New York. We don't know. we have no way of knowing. So that's the point, and that's the point I'm trying to make all the time. You have no way of knowing how many bitcoins another person has, regardless if it's Satoshi or your grandmother. You cannot know, and that's a good thing. That's one of the perks of the system. So yeah.
So is Bitcoin fungible? Sounds like it is to you, but is it?
A very good question. I'm not entirely convinced that it is, and this is one of the few problems I see with it in the long run. I think Giacomo Zucco has made some excellent points about this and how we should try to taint all coins with coin joins and so on, so that there's no distinction between a legitimate coin and an illegitimate coin, because right now that is a problem. If you buy a Bitcoin from a person or an exchange or anyone who registers you as a person, that person will know where those coins are, and they can see when you spend them and what portion of them you spend in the future, which is a fungibility issue. I think it goes away over time. It's an issue that will be solved, and if you use Bitcoin properly, that is, accumulate Bitcoin and don't use them, and wait for hyper-Bitcoinization to play out, that problem solves itself. But that's very long term. But I try to think very long term, because otherwise, what's the point?
I had a quick question, I'm curious. This is a pretty generic, basic question, but coming from you, I'd like to hear your perspective. But like, what would be, or not to get too private or whatever, but what would you say would be the best way for somebody to, self-custody Bitcoin? Like hardware wallets and things like that.
That depends entirely on your skills and your imagination, and it's up to each and every one of us. I mean, the first step is to take it off an exchange. The second step is to buy a hardware wallet. The third step would be to buy an additional hardware wallet. I truly recommend not mixing your KYC coins with your your non-KYC coins. You should keep them on separate wallets at least. The fourth step would be to run your own node. The fifth step would be to run your own node in different jurisdictions. And from that, you could do multisig and you could do all sorts of things. But keep in mind that a grandmother that received Bitcoin on a crappy mobile wallet 7 years ago is probably more likely to still have all her Bitcoins than anyone meddling with all of these other innovations. I mean, hodling is easy if you just buy once and don't give a shit about it for 20 years. That's probably the best way forward. But the thing, always keep in mind that the time preference thing is key here, and that's the real security model for you personally, is to change your time preference, think more long term.
Hey, Knut,
Beautiful.
sorry to bring it back to the fungibility thing, but I've always had this kind of itch in my brain Being like a business person, I try to look at where there might be profitability to be had. And the fact that Bitcoin isn't necessarily fungible to me seems like an opportunity to, you said over time that might solve it. And to me, I've just got this idea that if we were to lock away Bitcoins, like you say, hodl Bitcoins in wallets, but that there was some software program in which like wallets can be infinitely created. So a large amount of wallets are created at a rapid rate. Coins are stored in those wallets, and then some sort of unlock or giveaway system where someone obtains the private keys to that wallet in a like basically I'm saying if someone is born in 20 years and is given a wallet that was created today at the same time with 100 million other wallets all having the same amount of Bitcoin in it, is there value in that? Like, wouldn't that person pay money, a lot of money, to have had a wallet that's active years and years before their own like create like their own birth? I don't know if there's something there, but I've always had this itch.
I think you're underestimating the number of possible wallets. Finding an old wallet by just randomly choosing a Bitcoin address is like
not finding. I mean intentionally setting, like intentionally creating a bunch of
an
wallets
old.
now, storing what we would consider a small amount of Bitcoin now, but then later on in further generations, some system in which we can guarantee that when someone gets access to it at that point, they are like, it is as pure as them having created a new wallet, if that makes sense. But it's a wallet that has coins from generations before it. I don't know if that.
You can do that with a command called time lock, in which you lock up your Bitcoins for a certain amount of blocks. And in doing that, you can set up all sorts of, inheritance schemes for your descendants. Like if you unlock half of your Bitcoin to your descendants every 4 years, you can make sure that there's always an amount of Bitcoin for the next generation to have. And assuming that Bitcoin goes up by at least 100% every 4 years, every subsequent generation would have a larger amount of buying power, even though getting half the amount of Bitcoin as the previous generation. So there's a lot of things you can do with this thing, with a bit of imagination. But I don't think there's any attack vector there. I think the most successful attack vector to date is the cryptocurrencies, and the most successful attack is Ethereum, and that is laughable and has unicorns. So that's how how fucking bulletproof Bitcoin is.
Absolutely. I like that point a lot.
I was going to say too, to Arben's point, like if about fungibility. I mean, I guess to me, fungibility is always, going by its definition, is kind of a math issue. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin, 1 Satoshi equals 1 Satoshi within the network. But I'm saying, like, looking directionally, like the fungibility issue sounds like an issue that people take up is an issue taking place outside the money, meaning governments and whatnot. And if you look directionally at where Bitcoin's heading, you think of if there's a circular economy whereby exchanges don't exist because you can't buy Bitcoin, you can only work for Bitcoin, or you don't need to exchange Bitcoin for dollars anymore because there's enough goods and services sold in Bitcoin. It eliminates one of the main vectors by which that blockchain forensics attack. And then on top of that, you add in this massive data set. If transactions increase or users increase, wallets increase, you get this massive data set where it becomes very prohibitive or expensive to start tracking individual transactions if this is a global thing. And then on top of that, you add in layers, like the Lightning networks or Fedimint, things like this. It becomes really difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And are dollars fungible? There are. I bet there's a dollar out there that is more valuable than another dollar. I mean, if a famous painter puts his autograph on a dollar bill, that dollar bill becomes more valuable than all the other dollars. So like this is an issue with all money, and not only with Bitcoin. And as you say, as if you only the important thing here is censorship resistance, because no one, regardless of whether they are KYC'd or not, no one can stop you from using your Bitcoin. So that's the more important aspect of it, and it will always be more important than fungibility in that sense. But sure, I don't mind people working on the fungibility quote unquote issue. It's a good thing that people are, and with proper CoinJoin implementations in the future, it's like, I mean, already today, if you know what you're doing, you can very easily buy Bitcoins that are completely anonymous. If you buy them from someone you know, and you instantly CoinJoin them, and you don't use them for a while, and you instantly CoinJoin them again just before you sell them, then there's basically no way to track that. Especially if you do a proper CoinJoin where you can't even know, where you can't track them at all. And that technology is way more advanced than most people are aware of already now. And with Taproot and Lightning on top of that, I mean, and Schnorr signatures and whatever else is coming up, I mean, it's going to be harder and harder for these chain analytics companies to do anything. And bear in mind, keep in mind that the people working in chain analytics companies are exposed to how Bitcoin works all the time. They all have an incentive to become Bitcoiners themselves and stop working for the empire and start to join the rebellion. Like, and sooner or later they will, as their stacks grow. I mean, why would they want to keep a tedious fiat job like chain analytics if they can live better lives just exiting that world and start living off their Bitcoin at some point? I mean, there are so many solutions to this problem.
And maybe another encouraging sign is that I talked to a few security researchers, some data analytics people, data science people, and one of their jobs isn't just like looking at transactions on the chain and, you know what I mean, parsing the blockchain. Is also researching legal cases where people have been prosecuted for, you know, for whatever reason with Bitcoin. And it's very expensive, and it is very, very hard. Like, even once they get, like, I'm talking about the United States, even once they find, like, they can kind of, you know, kind of estimate whose coins they are from whatever metadata or just whatever else, you know, they still have to, they're still culpable in proving other things. So they actually need, like, physical access to a device. You need physical access to a computer. You know, you even saw this going back to one of the very first Bitcoin prosecutions with what's his face, Ross Ulbricht, where they even knew who he was, but it wasn't enough for a case. They still literally needed to get his computer open right before he closed it when they got busted in that library. And I think blockchain forensics they overestimate their abilities a lot, obviously, but I don't know, like, once that data set increases exponentially globally too, you know, it just becomes so hard.
Yeah, never sell your Bitcoins on an exchange. That's key. If you want to stay somewhat private, never accept fiat money into a bank account for Bitcoins. That's a good way to spend them if you want to get caught. So don't sell them on exchanges. That's the first thing. Exchanges are honeypots for these tax authorities or whatever they call themselves, and so don't sell them on exchanges. That's key.
Yeah, I think that might be just enough for most people. You know, not for all people. I mean, if you work in something you work in a very job where you need, or you do something where you need more privacy, then it's not enough. But I'm saying, like, for most people, like, it is enough. Just don't buy coins on KYC exchanges. And I usually buy my coins on decentralized exchanges. I like these. And I've sold coins. I sell coins on decentralized exchanges. I mean, I've even advertised coins, like non KYC pure coins that I've mined, and I've never been able to, the past 4 years, 3.5 years, I've never been able to get a premium on those.
So they are fungible then.
Yeah, I mean, it's just my observation. Also, I've transferred a lot of coins that I bought on non KYC exchanges to KYC exchanges before. Back when I wasn't shitcoining, but I was kind of trading Bitcoin and stuff, and kind of non KYC exchanges, kind of, not a lot of volume, kind of price premium on it and stuff. But I've never had a problem there either. I've never been flagged or anything like that yet.
I mean, I think there's still
Open dimes are underrated.
Sorry.
Just saying, open dimes are underrated.
I was gonna say there seems to be layers to the fungibility, because Knut, you do make a really good point about the dollar and the signature thing. I think Bitcoin mathematically is fungible, but I mean, people's perception of value, or like, that's never gonna be like the same. So.
No, value is subjective. So there's a deeper philosophical question here. Is there such a thing as fungibility? And yeah, I don't know if there is, and I don't know if we'll ever get an answer to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was gonna also add another point that like the fungibility thing. So, like, even outside the money, like, forget about the protocol and all that stuff. Outside the money, let's say
Time.
you want to make a very basic transaction where you buy something from Target. You order something from Target. I mean, if you order something from Target online, it doesn't matter how secure or how anonymous or what privacy you have with your protocol, you still need to provide a shipping address. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Guys, I think I need to I think I need to go now. So thank you for having me up here, and happy that everyone listened. You can see me in Riga, Amsterdam, and Prague this fall at the different conferences there. And you can find all my stuff on Knutsvanholm.com. So if you're interested in supporting my work, that's where you'll find my stuff. So thank you all for listening, and thanks for inviting me up. I enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you, Knut. I really appreciate you showing up out of the blue, and yeah, have a great time at those conferences, and looking forward to further discussions in the future. You know, it's pretty late here, my time at, like, it's 3 a.m., so wasn't very talkative, but yeah, I've really, this has been fantastic. One of the best things I've ever had. I never do spaces or host spaces, so anyways, thank you, and have a great day. Yeah, that was quite the show there. Wow.
I had to buy his book. This 11.5 inches.
Yeah, that was the funniest fucking thing I've
laugh.
heard, and that was hilarious, man. Does anybody want to come up and maybe share some thoughts, or just request to speak, and I'll bring you up? I don't know. I'll try to bring you up here again, this guy, but he just keeps going in and out. So, how's it going? I don't know how to say that name. Anybody can help me, maybe? Ignicio? I don't know. Damn,
Ignacio.
I'm bad at that. Thank you. Thank you. No, sorry.
Hello, good morning.
Are you there? Oh, how you doing today?
Very good, very good. I think Bitcoin now is gaining a basement and stabilizing to attack the next maximums. So I think this process can take approximately a few months, but in 6 months, 1 year, we will see it around 100K approximately, in my opinion.
Oh, well, thank you for the technical analysis there. That was totally random. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm not going to go into it. Yeah, what's up, everybody? Down there below. I guess it's early or late for everyone. You can stop sending me laughing emojis, Master Beats. I appreciate your laughter. If you want to come up and laugh as well out loud, LOL, that'd be great. Anybody? Come on. I mean, if
Okay,
you've never
okay, I'll go if you want me to.
go where?
I'll just say some shit.
Oh, okay, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I wanted to ask Knut because I had read his article in Bitcoin Magazine about scaling. You know how there's going to be less transactions and everything. It was really brilliant, just because it's so counterintuitive. Just like a lot of the stuff he says, it's really cool. It's very like deflationary base layer type thing, because I think deflationary base layers kind of, or deflationary systems, I'm not so sure we fully understand. They kind of do weird things. But I was going to ask him, one thing missing from his article I had thought was that if there's less transactions and people are sharing and, you know, stuff like this, people aren't necessarily spending their Bitcoin and everything like this, and they're sharing the wealth and all this stuff. I was just thinking how you can't, that's possible with an overabundance of goods and services, if that exists. But I don't think you can have an overabundance of goods and services if you don't have, say, an overabundance of energy. Because, you know, the what's the word? I don't even know the word, richness of a society is really based upon I can't remember the word, but like the richness of a society is always can be measured by its energy and its energy efficiency. So I thought maybe that was missing from the article, but at the same time, it's really interesting because Bitcoin's really fucking weird in that it also can do that. You know, it can also incentivize energy. Just because, you know, you think if you're going to separate money from state, you're actually going to do that. Then you're going to, I mean, how are you going to reproduce what the government does? Because they're the ones that, you know, they're the ones that subsidize energy through mostly manipulation of the tax code, cash credits, you know, import export duties, write-offs, stuff like that, taxes at large. You know, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of get that in many ways. I think that the big thing is just the way that. Do you mean by energy? Do you mean like by like the power that goes into miners as well, and like the value that creates for a society, I suppose?
Yeah, so kind of just like prosperity, there's the word. Yeah, so kind of like the prosperity of any nation, like at the base layer, you can always you can directly measure it by, you know, how much energy they have and its energy efficiency. So you need that to produce these goods and services, this abundance of goods and services. You can't create anything without energy. Like even countries, say, that are very natural resource poor, it doesn't really matter if they have energy, because then they can just import everything. They can import the raw materials and do their smelting, melting, fabricating, do their thing, create stuff, you know. But as far as Bitcoin goes, yeah, it's interesting just because if you look at it and how the mining incentivizes energy, flex load and base load, you kind of get this weird circle where, say, the deflationary money subsidizes the mining, right, through block rewards and transaction fees. Then the mining in turn subsidizes energy, and then the energy in turn subsidizes prosperity, which we'll call goods and services, which the deflationary money then absorbs. It kind of goes in this recycling circle. It's really crazy how Bitcoin can possibly do that. It's really weird.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that it's definitely opening. There's a lot of doorways opening up now that are going to really change the way that Bitcoin is mined, especially like with technology and the way that the power grids are operating, as you know, because I think that definitely in the next few years, because of the way that, you know, what's happening with this current president and everything, and the energy struggle, and you know, it's just a complete, I think, like a false agenda of making people, you know, shift to where they give away their power, their own individual power to choose, and now they're forcing, you know, all these different um, alternatives that aren't really necessary. It's more just to fill their pockets with um, fiat money, because, you know, it's just happening everywhere now, and it's really fucking awful. And I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think that the whole climate thing is not as bad as people really. I mean, it's bad, but it's also due to other situations, and, you know, just complete incompetence. And they've been doing this for 30 years, basically making it this way instead of being proactive. And now they're, you know, doing so many things to make it to where, you know, because if you have an electrical vehicle, you know, then you have to depend on the government and the energy grid to operate. But if, you know, you have a, you know, unfortunately, you know, hopefully something with, you know, that's outside of batteries and oil, um, becomes available in the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Just there's a lot of this. It's like nothing's actually being done except, like, it seems, symbolism. It's all just symbolism, and it's not just like it's Biden. It's not just Biden. You know, you can probably go back to, God, probably since I was born. But yeah, it just seems like this a lot of symbolism. You know, let's make it look like we're doing something over here by banning this or doing that, or it's just. But in the end, it's just symbolism. It's not real. Nothing's actually being accomplished.
Exactly. And hey, I was going to say, you know, if anybody's down there in the audience listening, I mean, if you've never been up on Spaces before, you know, nobody's here to judge you. Just come up here and talk, you know, get up on here, get up here. You know what I mean? And yeah, just thought I'd shout that out. It's a good training ground to be able to speak on Spaces. I won't, you know, won't judge you. If not, I'm probably it's getting late here, and yeah, I'm probably gonna go in the next 10 minutes or so. But what I'm trying to think. I mean, what do you think is how do you say your name? Mallards?
Yeah,
Mallards?
Mallard's Head.
Okay, gotcha. Um, oh, we got somebody. Uh, hey, how you doing? Bitcoin hurler.
Hey,
I like that one.
hey, how's it going?
Hurl that Bitcoin.
Thanks for having me up. Just one question or one thought you might have, like even Natalie Brunell was on that American show, the Tucker Carlson news channel. I'm not sure what it's called, but they questioned, oh, what if there's not enough Bitcoin? And I actually heard it on a cafe Bitcoin Spaces last week as well, and people trying to have really long, lengthy explanations about it. But to me, it was quite simple. Like, it doesn't matter that there's 21 million Bitcoins and 100 million Satoshis. Like, we could have picked 2.1 million Bitcoins with a billion Satoshis. It's the same thing. So if in the event of hyper Bitcoinization and let's say a pint of beer or Guinness or whatever you're having was one Satoshi, how would you buy a bottle of water if theoretically a bottle of water would be like 0.1 Satoshi? So, or if you bought a cake for one Satoshi, an apple should be 0.1 Satoshis, but you can't spend 0.1 Satoshis. Could the code not be changed, or this is where I lack the knowledge? Can you not just have a consensus change that like you just add an extra decimal point to Satoshis? So if you have 10 Satoshis, you now wake up the next morning and you have 100 Satoshis. You're not printing new Bitcoin, you're just making it more divisible. Like a stock split, basically.
Yeah, Bitcoin. So if you're going to talk about transaction layer, think about Lightning, the Lightning Network, for example. Bitcoin's infinitely divisible on the Lightning Network. It can be divided down to the 1,000 zeros Satoshi.
Oh,
Nice. That's a great question. All right. That's I actually I've thought about that as well before, but didn't like know the simple answer to that. Just straightforward. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, that's amazing because like the speakers on Cafe Bitcoin tend to be very, intelligent speakers, but nobody gave that straight answer. So thanks very much. Because you can add an extra slice to the cake, but you can break your piece of cake up into smaller pieces. You don't get diluted. And yeah, I couldn't figure that out. So thank you very much.
What's up, Disco Dad? You dancing like it's 1954
What's
or
up?
whatever
How
it is?
how are you guys?
Oh, doing great.
That's
How are you
good to
doing?
hear. Very well, thanks, mate. Very well. I don't want to bring this conversation back around to quote unquote the government's gonna ban it, man. But more than that, and I guess my tinfoil hat comes into play when I start to think about all the shit that the powers that have been and will be, all the shit that's been played even in our lifetime with 9/11, let's say, for instance, and like all of the false flags that are happening, and COVID to, I guess, a lesser degree, but this the power grab that has happened in the past few years alone, like I can't. I'm a full-blown maxi, but I can't break the thought that they won't try the most insane fucking things to stop this movement. And I haven't clocked how, and are there drone strikes on mining plants? You can't even do that because I know there are many with, and sorry if I'm rambling, but there are miners in homes that are on VPNs. You can't even spot them. But I'm just trying to think of like, has anyone thought like how, if they wanted to do what we know they're capable of doing, how that would be? Because fucking hell, this is like relinquishing the power of the money to the most fucking nefarious cunts in the world, and this has been happening for hundreds of years. So like, it's not going to be just this peaceful, then they fight you, then you win. It's like, I don't know, maybe I've had too many beers, but I just thought I'd just throw
No,
it out
no, go
there.
go ahead.
But it just seems to me like we haven't thought of everything, and there are pricks right now sitting in a darkened boardroom thinking, okay, engage version 2, because the media FUD's not working anymore. It just seems like there's something up their sleeve that we're not seeing, or maybe it's just my paranoia. So I don't know. I just thought I'd chime in there.
Yeah, maybe mallards. I mean, you have any thoughts on that, perhaps?
Yeah, I guess if they wanted to do anything, they'd better do it very, very soon. Just because, if this continues on, and like Knut had talked about, it becomes kind of the money everybody uses. and we have a circular economy and all of those things, then you have to start thinking about, it's not really a protocol problem anymore. You have to actually overcome kind of this collectivism problem. Because if everybody's connected to the same network, the Bitcoin network, and everybody's using the same money globally, then it becomes a very big problem, because you might not actually be able to attack it anymore. Because then you have to start asking the question, well, if everyone's using the same network and everybody's using the same money, then how is somebody paying to attack the network? And why would they attack the network if they're going to lose all their money because they use that same money? So who's paying them? How are they getting paid? And how do they expect to profit from this in any way? You know?
Yeah, that's awesome answer. That's all. And I've messaged Mr. Breedlove on this topic, and he said, game theory is that they're better off buying into the network than trying to attack it. It just seems like, like people are just clinging tooth and nail and sinker to try to hold on to this collapsing piece of shit system that we're currently meandering through before they suddenly admit on CNN, we were wrong. And now we should all just use this new amazing technology that we've been shit canning for the past 13 years. I guess there will be a turning point, just who knows when.
Yeah, I think there will be. I really do. It's interesting. I mean, even like now, like you look at all these centralized systems. Talk about like Solana and all these centralized systems. Even the ones that use like centralized derivative money, where the majority of their volume is, say, stablecoins, stuff like that. Or think of even just stablecoins at large, like Tether and whatnot. It's like, dude, the SEC and stuff is having, just even the world at large is having a real hard problem, even kind of dealing with the centralized stuff. So then you have to start thinking about like, oh, well, Bitcoin, talk about trying to take down the decentralized system or the distributed system. It's can't be done.
Are we seeing behind the curtain of their fallibility, maybe? And we've always thought that they had these major powers, but really they're just men in suits and women, sorry, in suits, pantsuits that really don't know much but shuffle papers and, have fancy business card titles. I don't know. Makes you think. But guys,
Yeah,
I
I
really
well,
appreciate this chat. Thank you.
real quick, Disco Dad, hold on.
Yeah, I'm here.
Is this your first time like being up on Spaces or?
It's my second actually.
Okay, okay, cool. I'm glad I've said something, and Bitcoin Hurdle as well came up to share, and it's always an interesting time. Just it takes a bit of courage to get up on stage and just talk to your phone. You know what I mean? Um,
It's yeah, totally. And it's like, how many people are in here? Like 30 something.
yeah,
And like there's numerous levels of understanding and technicality, and I don't for a second proclaim to be technical. And hearing Knut speak, I was just fucking, oh my shit. Yeah, it's
yeah,
really cool to know that you can tap into this hive mind of people that just so fucking smart. It just gives me so much, I guess, courage and confidence in the future that like that the smarts are on our side. And it's like you add like a sprinkle of libertarianism, and it's like they've got no fucking chance. And I guess from my point of view, it's like having a deep understanding of all the shit that's happened, all the wars, all the bloodshed, everything to kind of keep a falling apart system glued together. And then there's this. It's like they're not just going to turn over. But I understand game theory, and I really appreciate. Yeah, I don't know who was talking to me a second ago, but I really appreciate the answer. I just feel like they've got a few tricks up their sleeve, and I'm like
yeah.
trying to guess what the fuck they are. And
Well,
is it going to be the is it going to be the global internet blackout that they keep on seeding? Is it going to be energy is so valuable that you can't even have hot water, so we'll certainly not allow Bitcoin mining. Like all the attempts, I'm sure that will come up. Sorry, I interrupted you, mate.
No, no, no. I was interrupting you, and I agree that there's definitely numerous different ways that it could, potentially, threaten things, but also you got to think as well on another level that, they're in it for the money. They want to make money, basically, and have their power and power over humanity. And if they're, if they are going to continue that way, then they need to make sure that everything continues to operate in a smooth way. So, somewhat smooth, I suppose. But it's not going to change. They're not. I don't think that there's going to be any type of like massive wars or. I mean, it's just a bunch of proxy stuff, and now that technology and like surveillance and everything else is so good that I feel like the likelihood of like a massive like attack or anything like terrorist attack is going to happen because they pretty much have everything on lockdown, in my opinion. That needs to be, I but that's just my opinion. I think, and, especially with like the energy sector and just everything. I think that it's in a way that it's just not beneficial in many ways. I mean, obviously the WEF and the World Economic Fund, and numerous other organizations. They've even stated. I mean, it's so in front of our face. They don't even lie anymore about what's going on, and it's kind of unbelievable. But I think that people in humanity are definitely waking up and realizing, and the media that's out there, the mainstream media, portrays it as a larger group of individuals that back their vision. Whenever the ordinary individual that's not like just got out of college and thinks that they know everything in the world, there's a lot more people than the previous or not but the recent college graduates. And as they get older, they become less brainwashed, in my opinion. So I think with Bitcoin and with what's happening in the world, people are waking up to everything that's going on even more so. But
Couldn't agree more. My last question is, where in the fuck? Okay, you've got Trudeau, Macron. You've got in my country you had Albanese, but you used to have Morrison. You've got dictators in every quarter. Like, where the fuck are all the lone gunmen? where are the lone crazed gunmen when you need them? But if an
Attacking the
agency,
wrong people.
the government agencies are listening in, this was purely satire. I did not mean
yeah,
that. It's
well,
it's just yeah.
I thought you meant like the lone gunmen as like the lone leaders of different countries that would speak up against what's happening. And that's
No, I'm
okay.
talking about
Well,
the
yeah,
lone gunman that
yeah.
many. Yeah,
I know.
you get me. You get me.
Yeah.
Um, guys, thanks so much. I really appreciate this. I'll hopefully see another one of your spaces very soon and jump in and say good day.
Yeah, absolutely. Good times and great oldies.
Cheers, guys. Peace out.
Peace. Have fun at Studio 54. All right. Well, that's a wrap. That's thank you, my lord, or mallards, and everybody else for joining and listening for that's left here. And I'll probably do spaces more, whenever something comes up.
Yeah, I think you should. I mean, it just seems like this kind of spaces thing is kind of like this, this kind of this really cool peer-to-peer thing where everybody kind of gets to come up and educate themselves or listen or do whatever. It seems like it could possibly even replace podcasting. It's really hot right now. So yeah, thanks for doing the spaces. They're very, very popular.
Absolutely, man. I love, I mean, the Twitter spaces, like, pretty much like changed my life, honestly. I know it might sound crazy, but um, being able to learn about, I was into like different cryptocurrencies and different things, like I guess like last October, November, but then I got on here and started listening and talking to people about, Bitcoin only and just the whole 9 yards about, understanding Bitcoin in a more profound way, that it's really there's no reason to have all these other shit coins that are out there. And yeah, it's pretty exciting. And I definitely, if you're not following Swan Bitcoin, I think what is it? I'm probably going to miss it this morning, but they have a space at, I think it's like 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where they do a 2-hour show. I'm trying to think who's coming up today, actually. Shout out to Swan Bitcoin, but who is it? Let me see here. I think it's Tony Vase.
Yeah, that's him.
Is he? Let me see who's supposed to be coming up. Let me see real quick. They put out a schedule. Where did it go?
Yeah, I love it. Just the conversation around Bitcoin, man. Like you talked about shit coins and stuff. It's just, but the conversation like around Bitcoin is broad. It's just massive. It encompasses like so much stuff. Where shitcoiners are kind of talking about, oh yeah, TPS and TX cost and price and NFT but Bitcoin conversation is just huge. It's massive, and that's really encouraging.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really super fun time, and being able to just talk about random things as well. There's a lot of very unique spaces out there, so it's really really good time. So, anyways, we'll catch you on the flip side, and everybody have a great time, and yeah, keep on stacking them sats. Buy that dip. You know what I mean? I'm just trolling about some, different things people have said in the past about on different shows. So, anyways, everybody, be safe. Take care.